There's so many rules in 40K, hundreds of events, and constant updates. Skip the learning curve of Warhammer and join the pros. Art of War is led by multiple world champions with decades of success. We teach clinics, stream games, and inspire you to succeed at your favorite hobby. Join our global community of gamers just like you.
Welcome back, everybody, to another tier list. This time, it's the Forces of the Tau Empire, brand new 9th edition Codex, and we're going to do a tier list. We've done Necrons and AdMech over the past couple weeks, and then we did a big faction one previously before that, so you can head down over on the main channel down to our playlists, and you'll see there's a tier list one if you want to check those other ones out. This time, we're doing a faction that's near and dear to my heart, right, Jack?
That's right. I mean, it's the one that first caused me to get upset playing you. And it won't be the last.
It certainly wasn't the last.
But now I'm on board the Tau train, so...
So Jack is going to join me. He's also as excited for this book. And show off that Codex there, Jack. Come on. Ooh. Look how stylish that thing looks.
Courtesy of Warpfire Minis.
Yeah, Warpfire Minis. And I got Storm Surges a couple days ago. So you're going to see more of those soon.
I mean, those have to go into Nick, right?
But how do we do these tier lists? Well, we focus on the internal balance of the Codex. So we are going to primarily go through every single unit, all the data sheets, and look at which ones are good, why they're particularly good, what unique things they bring to Tau, and why you're going to take them over other options. And so instead of doing the kind of generic S, A, B, etc. tiers, instead I wrote out different criteria here. So Tournament Staples, that's the units you're going to see in pretty much every list that's trying to do well at a G tier or better. The Strong in most lists, it's a unit that's just very good. You might not see it in every single list, but it's often going to be there. You'll see it more often than not. Situational but good is this unit does something unique that is quite good, but at the same time, it's not necessary. It's built into particular lists. Overcosted, rarely seen. As it says,
overcosted, and you rarely see it.
You rarely see it because, for whatever reason, it doesn't do its job well enough. It's competing with other things, like we saw on the AdMech tier list. Too many units were competing, and so some were left down here. And then other times, it's just too many points.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's just, it's a good unit, but it just costs 20% more than it should, and so it falls into purple tier.
YGWY is the tier where this unit just doesn't do what it should be doing. It doesn't do anything. It's pointless, and at the same time, why? GW.
Why? GW?
You could have given it a purpose.
Why?
Like, please.
I don't know how many of those are going to be in this, but we'll see.
Yeah, I've been talking it up, and a little spoiler, I think this is one of the better internal balanced books, the Codex at least. So maybe we'll see some of the Forge World stuff down there, though.
I'm likely to take this army to Cherokee ITC event at the end of this month, so we'll see.
All right, as usual, I've organized it a little bit different, although it seems to have gone against my will here and reorganized itself. So Pathfinders, you're going back to Fast Attack, please.
Towner, obviously.
And the Towner.
Oh, I thought we were starting with the big boy.
No, we're not. So I had organized it, and I think when I put into preview mode, it reorganized. So, but we're going to do it as normal HQs. Then we're going to go into the troops, elites, fast attack, heavy support, and then finish off with those transports, the super heavies, and then finally Forge World at the end, just to keep it consistent. So let's go ahead and start.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know who this is?
That Mr. is On Shi.
That is On Shi. Okay.
He's from the Viorla Sept.
He is from the Viorla Sept.
See, I've been doing my research.
He has the ability to give other units set to defend, but they have to be Viorla. So even though Ethereals have the rule where they can go into the named ones can go into different detachments, except for Farsight Enclaves, him and Anva can do that. Unfortunately, his really unique thing only benefits the Viorla Sept, and so baseline, Ethereals are really good.
Is it set to defend, or is it...
It's both of them, set to defend. So it's Overwatch and getting +1 to hit.
Yeah, Overwatch is clearly the part you're going to be excited about in Tau.
Hold steady.
Hold steady, got it. If you're running Viorla, I could definitely see running him.
He's 100% in Viorla itself.
Viorla, on the other hand, one of the more...
It's an okay set.
It's all right.
The problem is one of the parts of the trait is plus 2-inch movement in your deployment zone if it's the first turn. That's just
not enough.
It's not the entire game. Like the traits that last the entire game and have good things like Borkon, Tau Sept, and
I don't
Farsight.
think it's if it's the first turn. I think it's just if you start in your deployment zone. Yeah. But as you said, that's very situational.
It's niche,
and it's generally units will only benefit from it once a game. So,
it's a little unfortunate, but I think he is actually good if you're running Viorla, and if you're not, he's not good because you're going to take a generic ethereal instead. So in Viorla, he's awesome. Otherwise, you're not really going to see him. Next up, we got the Kroot Shaper. Jack, 25-point HQ.
All right, now you got my attention. Although this army does not need HQs. It has enough good HQs that you do not need to fill that slot. But continue.
So he's a captain for your Kroot, and then on top of that, you can use his leadership, which I believe is leadership 8 instead of the normal Kroot leadership 6. 25 points. He can't take the Sept specific relics because they require a Sept character to take them, but he can take other ones.
He can take that weird Kroot Shaper sniper gun or something.
He can take the sniper. It's not actually horrible.
It's not great, though.
It's at the same time, are you actually taking it? And at the same time, are you actually buffing Kroot? Because Kroot are very good in this book, and we're going to get to them. But I think the character here not only doesn't do enough to buff them in the ways that you want, like extra movement or rerolling advances, that would be very useful because they're generally going to be screening units and cheap chaff thrown onto objectives.
Yeah.
The Kroot are not going to be the damage dealers in your army.
He does give them buffs. The buffs aren't completely irrelevant, but they don't take the Kroot over the top of any sort of damage metrics. It doesn't make their damage good enough to where they kill an entirely new class of thing. So functionally, it doesn't really alter their damage very much at all. And he is only 25 points, but you don't really need HQ fillers in this army, as we will get to.
Exactly.
Because the HQs in this book are really good. So, bit of a swing and a miss, I think, on this one. And that's fine.
I'm leaning rarely seen. I don't think you're going to see him too often just because he's 1 point more expensive than 4 Kroot Hounds, and those Kroot Hounds are probably going to be more useful for what you want.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd see him in Daliath because they actually buff the auxiliaries more. But outside of that...
probably would see him in Dallas.
You probably would. But outside of that, I don't think you're going to see him. And it's not because he's overcosted. 25 points is reasonable. It's just there are so many better choices.
Yeah, he's outshone.
The Fireblade. The Fireblade is the main character to buff your infantry units. So he has an aura of 6s to hit for your pulse weapons are an additional hit for those strike teams and those breachers.
Pretty good.
It's quite good. You can go ahead and give him a relic that is reasonably good. It's the Lantern. So when you go ahead and shoot your marker light, you can roll 5 additional dice. But I believe the way it's written, you have to just put them all at the same target. So not a lot of splitting there. And how many times are you going to need 5 marker lights on the same target? Kind of rare.
Yeah, probably not quite as good. What's the transport capacity of a Devilfish?
12.
12. That's good. If it was 10, he would be a lot worse because you couldn't include him alongside your Breacher rush.
Yep,
down.
You can throw a 10-man Breacher with a drone in there, so you could bring the Guardian drone, and then have the Fireblade still fit in there.
Yeah.
So he's okay. I ran him in a list with Breachers, and I didn't roll many 6s that turn.
But you could have. I mean, he's not bad. He's functionally +1 to hit with 6s explode. 6s explode is functionally an additional. Is functionally +1 to hit, which is something that Tau want. Mathematically, it's the same until you factor in rerolls. That's something Tau want. Amping up the damage of Breachers in a platform that can go alongside Devilfish is not bad. I think this is a pretty clear situational, but good.
Yeah, I think if you are running him with the Breacher Rush, say for instance you're running Custom Sept, you get that +1 strength for assault weapons.
Strength 7.
So now they're strength 7. One unit's rerolling to wounds. The others are just benefiting from Monka to help there. He's actually situational but good. If you're running Breach Rush, he's 50 points.
50 points, yeah.
He's cheap enough,
but good,
yeah.
for sure. He's definitely not strong in most lists, and he's not overcosted, and he has a role in a viable build of Tau. So I think he's pretty clearly situational but good.
All right, next up is the generic Ethereal. So Ethereals get access to Invocations of the Elements.
Yep.
They know one... they are able to cast 1, the baseline, but then there's the Humble Stave, which is the relic, and you can cast 2, and they go off on 2 up instead of a 3.
With a hover drone, he's what, 65?
65, yeah. 60
That
base.
is disgusting. It's so good.
Well, we didn't even get into the actual
Oh, let's get into the invocations,
So
Siegs.
there's
Let's get into
several
the
that are very good.
invocations.
5 up Feel No Pain on a core unit, so that's your Broadside,
Yep.
Crisis unit. 5 up Feel No Pain, amazing there. You can get -1 to hit if the unit moves from
Which your
ranged
units
attacks.
are going to move a lot, especially since Montcalm feels like the better choice out of Montcalm and Callion generally.
Yep.
So your units are going to be moving. They're not going to care about... They're going to be advancing and shooting. So you're just like, yeah, that unit's -1 to hit.
And perhaps one of the better ones is you just get a CP.
Yeah, you just 2-up CP.
So you don't have to take the Pure Tide Engram Chip Relic. Instead, you just take the Humble Stave and you give this guy the CP Invocation.
It also combos well with taking multiple detachments because you want to, because we'll get to it later, but commanders are pretty good. And you can only take 1 commander per detachment.
Yep.
So if you take 3 patrols, which is something I'm very strongly considering, you can take the Ethereal to counteract that CP cost by giving you a CP, for the 5 turns of the game.
Now, when I roll that, I often roll a 1.
Right.
And there's no
won't,
reroll
though.
on it?
I won't.
For whatever reason, I think the Ethereal sense that I'm a true member of the Farside Enclaves and don't trust me. So they're like, we're not fasting these powers reliably.
100%. You and Nick roll good during the game, but bad on powers. I roll good on powers.
So I think the Ethereal is amazing. The powers alone are great. You cannot take one in Farside Enclaves, and you cannot buff Farside Enclaves units unless you run the Allied World set. In which case, you're losing out on the Talisman and you're losing on the 2 commanders per detachment roll.
So it does feel like a trade-off.
It's a little bit of a trade-off, but that's still a great package there. The Ethereal is one of the best HQs in this book.
For sure.
And
I think it's a straight to the top with him.
boop, tournament staple. I think if you are not running pure Farside Enclaves, you're going to see at least 1 Ethereal in the builds.
I think 1 Ethereal Humble Stave on a hover drone, potentially with some drones alongside him.
Marker drones,
bodyguarded him with the marker drones, markering people. He's super good, very strong.
Yep, and with the hover drone, he's able to keep up with the Crisis unit as it moves up the board.
Yeah.
So I think he is one of the auto includes in this army.
Super good.
All right, Jack, you mentioned it. It's the commander data sheet. Now, whatever, this tier list didn't have every individual commander broken out, so it's just the Cold Star here, but he's going to represent all 3 commanders, and we're going to talk about all 3.
Yes.
Because guess what? They all got amazing buffs from 8th edition to 9th edition, and they
sure did.
They were already one of the best units. In my opinion, they were the best unit in the Talbook in the 8th edition.
Yep, shooting that cannot be shot back is good, and they're good shooting. Like, a lot of the time when you look at characters that shoot, you're like, oh, that's a good character that shoots, and it has like a melt-a-gun or something. Or it's Vol with like a 2-shot missile and a heavy bolter. It's because you can't shoot them back is the reason why it's good.
Yes,
No.
Turn after turn damage.
Commanders, don't worry, you also can't shoot them back, but their shooting is good. Like, good for a unit good.
Yep, and there are Warlord traits, relics, prototypes that buff that shooting.
For sure.
So,
there are some amazing Warlord traits in the
Let's
book.
just start baseline the different commanders.
Yes.
Crisis Commander.
Crisis Commander.
All the commanders are now captains, so they're a 6-inch aura reroll 1s. That used to be the first marker light in 8th edition. Now it's just an aura you have for your core units.
Right, and you want to take commanders, so you're going to have that pretty much army-wide to all your core units.
So Crisis Commander, what does he do? Oh, he's amazing. So, he's amazing.
Don't get me started.
Here we go. He's got 2 amazing abilities that he gives out to one of your core Crisis units. So, starting off, you can ignore any or all modifiers to hit. That's your advance. You advance and shoot. You'll ignore that penalty. There's a forest. They have -1 to hit somewhere. Doesn't matter.
Nope.
I'm going to decide I'm going to ignore those modifiers. And because it's any modifiers, you still get your +1 to hit from a marker light.
You can choose to ignore the +1 if you want.
You could choose, but I'm never going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy.
Nah.
So that's already great. On top of that, Jack, what else do you get from the Crisis Commander?
Oh, boy. Well, not only was that the best buff, because people are going to try and spam -1 to hit because Tau theoretically is weak to it. Mm-hmm. So the Crisis Commander just negates that. Not only was that the best buff, but also you can fall back and shoot. So you target a unit, it not only ignores hit penalties, but it also falls back and shoots. Now, specifically...
And charge.
And, don't let me forget,
both.
so you can jump over and take objectives and stuff.
Yep.
This is specifically for Crisis suits. We think Crisis suits are very strong, so these buffs are very strong. That's an insane buff package for Tau, and a lot of the strategies that I or John or whoever have come up with to try and like weather Tau shooting or to try and beat them gets shut down by that one buff. By itself shuts them down. Oh, what if I have the dense cover banner and then I do another thing that's like -1 to hit or something, so it counteracts the marker lights. And Sieg's like, yeah, I'm going to hit on 3s because they just select the unit and no hit penalties. So an insane buff, include one in your list, which should tell you where this is eventually going to end up.
It also means you don't have to go for Kalyun to get that fallback and shoot access.
100%.
You just have this on your Crisis units, and you're going to see this. Why we really love Crisis units is because they get some of these awesome buffs.
Yes.
On top of that, we've got, guess what? The Cold Star Commander.
Cold Star Commander, don't worry, he's also coming in with a great buff.
He used to move 20 inches and flat advance 20. He did lose that. Now he has a once per game teleport, more than 9 inches away, and he moves 14 base.
Yes.
It's still good.
It's still good.
Great.
He probably got a little worse on his mobility. Who's really counting, you know?
It's still fine.
It's still okay, buddy.
He's got the four hard points like the other commanders, but he has an inbuilt target lock, so he ignores cover. So he really benefits from taking the lower AP weapons because he'll be ignoring the light cover.
Yep.
And then on top of that, his data sheet ability is you pick a core crisis unit, and guess what it does, Jack? You don't have to roll an advance roll. Instead, you get plus 8 inches of movement. And crisis bodies move, they used to move 8. They got plus 2-inch movement in the Codex, so now they move base 10. So crisis unit moving 18 inches, potentially fall back and shooting if needed.
But what you're telling me is if it advances, it can't shoot, right, Siegs?
It's all assault weapons. But even if it wasn't, you still, with Monka, count
With
stationary.
Monka. Or with assault weapons, the other commander targets them as well, and now they're advancing shooting, no penalty. There's so many ways to get around the advancing and shooting thing.
Yep.
Just don't even worry about it.
Ballistic skill 4 on your regular crisis suits, it's still fine because of these buffs that are being put out.
Yep.
And they have insane mobility. I've been using this in almost every single game.
It's so good.
It allows you to move up to that midfield terrain piece very reliably, shoot whatever's behind it, and then shoot the airburst downrange if you run the airburst frag launchers. And then you fire and use strike and fade to get back behind
Strike
terrain.
and fade is really good, worth building an army around for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing about the Crisis Commander is his guns. You don't get the cyclics. Or the Cold Star. Cold Star. You don't get the cyclics, which would be broken on him, even more than it is now. It would be broken on him if he got cyclics. So he doesn't get cyclics, but don't worry. His guns are still very good. He makes the best use out of burst cannons in the entire book. He has a 10-shot burst cannon at AP1. You can give him the prototype system for an 8-shot burst cannon strength 6 AP1. And then you give him like 2 frag launchers.
Yep.
And you have an excellent anti-infantry package that moves very, very fast, gets angles, shoots, is still a character, can be bodyguarded, insanely good.
I think the best Cold Star you can get is the Cold Star in Borkon, where you take the Warlord trait for extra AP and mortals on 6s because of the volume that the commander puts out, and the extra AP plus target lock, plus Monka AP and inbuilt. It's super good. And then you also can get +1 to wound on 2 of the weapons with their relic.
Can you take a multi-tracker on him as well, so that the 2 weapons that are really good
I don't know if
his
data sheet. I don't know if his data sheet allows him to take multi-trackers.
But either way, if you take air bursts instead of the multi-tracker, right? So you take the loadout I just said, but you take the Warlord trait and relic from Borkon. That man is a monster. Yeah. Monster.
I always prefer running the 4 weapons. That's just my preference. If I wanted to go for the defense of Shield Generator, instead I'd go for one of the relics instead.
For sure, the Solid Image Projection unit.
Or the Big L Hunter if you wanted that.
The Bagel Hunter?
The Bagel Hunter defense.
The only reason I ask is it buffs 2 of his guns. So you buff the 2 best guns, and then everything else on him would be to support those 2. But he comes with a target lock inbuilt, which is really good great for a guy who wants to use a lot of burst cannons, a lot of AP 1 or 2.
Yep.
So that is very, very solid.
Yeah, the prototype burst cannon is one that I look to put on the Cold Star.
For sure. I really want to run that guy in my eventual
It's also
list.
very cheap.
So he's a great buff package. He's better by himself than the Crisis Commander is, but the Crisis Commander has a better buff. The real answer is you run both. You take at least 2 detachments. If you're running Tau, you're not running at least 2 commanders. Do it. I mean, so then we come to the Enforcer.
Yep,
commander.
third in line, the Enforcer. He went from a 3-up armor to a 2-up armor base.
Yep.
So he got improved there. He's the one that only moves 8 inches, so he's the slowest of the commanders. But he has -1 damage.
So he is tanky.
So with the defensive relics that we were talking about,
The Bagel Hunter.
Yeah, the Bagel Hunter or the Solid Projection unit, you can get this guy, whichever one you choose. He's very, very tanky.
Yes.
And on top of that, he gives out OBSEC to a core crisis unit. So Tau's OBSEC is very fragile. especially because you have to run them in big units. So even if they get whittled down, you're taking a nasty morale check. Fire Warriors lost the auto pass morale on 6s from the bonding knife. They lost that ability. It's now a relic once per game, so you're really not going to see it. And because of that, you're not going to have a lot of OBSEC. Once you commit your OBSEC, it's pretty much dead from your opponent's going to finish it off.
Yeah.
Late game, having the crisis unit be OBSEC in the middle of the board, denying primary points, just having one model on the objective when you've killed your opponent's OBSEC with airburst, it is a powerful ability. So
it also makes it so that your opponent has a harder time taking objectives away from you. You have one model from the crisis unit standing on an objective. They go to take the objective back from you. You go, no, he's OBSEC. Get out of here with that.
Yep.
It's still my objective. I still get my points. And you committed a unit. Awesome. I'm Tau. Boom. They're all dead. So it's very strong. I would probably put the Enforcer in strong in most lists. Probably just because he has such steep competition in other commanders. One
thing that we've talked about is loading him up with the defense and then stringing him out to a center objective. And we go ahead and put the Flamer prototype on there.
Yep.
So that he's actually good in melee as well.
Precision of the Hunter.
Yep.
For reroll hits and wounds, which, by the way, also works in combat.
And you give him the Bagel Hunter so that he's +1 save, 5 up, feel no pain. He hunts bagels.
He hunts bagels. I do too. Listen.
Jack does too. So he's super defensive. He's actually good in combat. And he has 2 drones in his unit strung back to the bodyguards. You can't shoot him away. And you got to charge him. He has that much defense with a potential 1 CP savior protocol in there. He doesn't go down. He swings back, hurts the unit or forces you to send something so dangerous.
Yeah. Either this guy has a 4-up invuln and can pass off 2 failed saves, as well as being -1 damage and having 7 wounds. Or he has a 1-up armor save, a 5-up feel no pain, -1 damage, and 7 wounds, and can pass off the first failed save, and has a shield drone in the unit as well, so you take invulns on. Either way, it's going to be very hard to kill this guy. I don't really know what does, to be honest with you.
If you want to go for max bodyguard abuse,
you can't shoot him.
I believe that is the character that you want to go for.
He's insane. He is a little less of an auto-include than the Crisis Commander and the Cold Star, which in my mind restricts him to triple detachment. Sometimes even in triple detachment, you want double Crisis Commander, 1 Cold Star. It either restricts him to triple detachment in my mind, or it restricts him to Farsight Enclaves, where you can run more than 2 commanders really easily.
Yep.
For that reason, I would probably put him in strong in most lists. Doesn't really matter. He is insane rated by himself. All the commanders are. Yep. He has steep competition with the other commanders. The other commanders just provide more for your army. But the Enforcer is very strong. Do not underrate him.
Yeah, the mandatory one in my mind is the Crisis Commander, followed by the Cold Star, followed by the Enforcer, but they're all so good because of the buffs that they put out and the amount of damage that they put down range that you can't really go wrong with any of them. So the commanders are an absolute tournament staple.
100%.
Minimum 1, and like Jack said, you're probably taking multiple detachments, so 2 commanders per list.
At least. And
then Farsight Enclaves, I've ran all 3 in a list.
I put 4 in a list.
Yep.
I want to run minimum 3 commanders. I think they're the best unit in the book, in my opinion. I think they're the best unit in the book. They are a clear build around with bodyguards. And I think the more commanders you include in your list, the better the list is. Really. They're just really good.
Michael has 3 Shapers in his list. Oh, no, Michael. No. Well, the Shapers love you. It must be Daliath. I cannot imagine running... You must have maxed out all the other Kroot at that point.
I mean,
but
if you got to run 300 Kroot, there's only one way to do it,
£5 super chat from King Hef. Thank you so much, King Hef. If we pause at the tower a bit overtuned, are points adjustments enough, or are there other problematic areas? That is an awesome question and a deep one. So I'm going to save that at the end, and we can talk about Tau and the overall wrap-up.
Yes.
And where we think things could end up.
I think the TLDR, if you have to leave, is, at least in my opinion, it's a little early to say. They seem very good. Perhaps some of the interactions could be tuned back without toning down the points, but I think it is a little too early to say whether they are broken, although they do seem very strong.
I think they're absolutely A tier, if not an S tier army.
Yeah, I don't want to just slam them into S tier, on spec, but I'll slam him to A tier on spec with the option of going into S. It's kind of where we put Custodies, right? When they came out, was like clearly an A, possibly an S, pending. Now they are an S.
Yeah.
You know, because we have enough results, we have enough play time to realize, yes, they are actually that good. We'll see with Tau, and we're going to talk about this more in detail later, so tune in later.
Yep. We will come back to this question.
We
will.
will.
It's a very good one.
It is a very good one, considering I think that's the topic at hand in the meta at the moment.
All right. Other characters. Let's go. We're talking about commanders. Commander Farsight. Commander Farsight is a crisis commander, so baseline he has 2 of the best buffs you can give out.
He really does.
It's awesome. In addition, he's quite a bit better in melee now. He's flat 3 damage, or he has a sweep profile. 5 attacks, hits on 2s. He's got to reroll the wound based on the
Strength 10,
trait.
AP 3?
AP 3, flat 3.
Flat 3.
In addition, he can give you +1 to hit in combat on a unit. Not really as relevant now because ATS doesn't work in...
Yeah.
The ATS isn't a thing anymore.
If some kind of Farsight Enclaves thing comes out with buffs to combat, you would want to go back to Farsight, and that +1 to hit would matter. As it is right now, making your crisis suits hit on 4s doesn't feel particularly relevant.
It was that old strat, that 1 CP if you're near a commander, full rerolls to hit and wound.
In combat.
And they had ATS for AP on all their weapons, including their basic combat fists. That's what made the combat so scary. Potential mortals on the charge as well was helpful. So I would love to see those strats again, but unfortunately they're stuck in that for the greater good Psychic Awakening. So that unique ability that he gives isn't quite good enough, and then he just has a high-intensity plasma rifle.
Yeah, it's a 2-shot plasma.
It's a 2-shot plasma. But
I think it's a little extra range, potentially. Maybe not. It doesn't particularly matter.
I think it's still 30-inch range.
He doesn't have any drones with him, which makes the bodyguard shenanigans a little worse.
Yep.
Which is unfortunate.
Inbuilt shield generator.
Inbuilt shield gen. I think he's strong for sure. He's cheap, which is nice. The problem is, in my mind, he takes up a commander slot.
Yep.
And the commander that you would replace him with will just do more.
Now, the lucky thing is, if you do want to take him, he has to be your warlord. But guess what? His warlord trait is one of the best. It's exemplar of the Monka. So if you pick Monka, if your unit's within 12 of the targeted unit, reroll wounds.
Yes. He does not suffer from being forced to be your army's warlord, unlike somebody we will get to in about 30 seconds. He's not bad. I think he's solidly strong in most lists, in my opinion. But he just suffers from the comparison to the Crisis Commander, considering he takes up the same slot.
As much as I love him, I think he is actually situational but good.
Really? I did not expect I would have a higher opinion of him than you.
I've run him multiple times.
It's true. He can't stop you.
Unfortunately, I think it is better just to get an extra Crisis Commander.
I think that's right. I just didn't want... He suffers from the comparison. He doesn't suffer from being bad.
He is good. He's 130 points. That's completely reasonable for a commander. I think the extra firepower that you get from a different Crisis Commander is a bit better. I'm willing to pay the points premium on that.
Is there a possibility of taking 5 or 6 commanders in Farsight Enclaves? I think at that point you would see him.
Yes.
Because he's just cheap enough to include in the list. And I think there is potential for a list that includes like 1 airburst unit and then like 6 commanders. Yeah. And then that airburst unit would be like bodyguards or something, and then you just build completely around commanders. And then I think you would see him. But, I mean, that seems fairly clearly situational, but good. So
yeah, I'm going to leave him there.
Yep.
Then we have...
Speaking of which...
Shadow Sun.
So Farsight doesn't care that he has to be your army's warlord because he has the best warlord trait. Whereas the thing that is going to knock her down the list as much as it does is the fact she's forced to be your army's warlord and she has Exemplar of the Kalyan.
Which, on the baseline, it's a redeploy. And redeploys are actually quite useful.
They are.
Problem here is it's 1 core unit, and if you're not in Kalyan. If you're in Kalyan, it's 3. The problem is Monka is so much better than Kalyan that you're almost always picking it, in which case you're only redeploying 1 unit. Which isn't, like, horrible, but because Tau has such good warlord traits, and she must be the warlord, unless you're trying to run her in a Supreme Command with Farsight, then you can choose between... No, well, in the Supreme Command, she has to be the warlord. So even then, it's just...
Yeah, it's... If you could run both her and Farsight, which you cannot do in the same list, because she would require...
no, you can run them both. You can run Farsight in a Farsight detachment, and then her in the Supreme Command.
Oh, that's right.
Both rules interact. She has to be the warlord because she's in the Supreme Command.
Yeah. So she would have to be your warlord. There's no way to one-up her with Farsight.
What does she do positively? Well, she's a chapter.
She's very good.
She's a chapter master and a captain. Now, instead of benefiting only Tau Sept units, she benefits Tau Sept ones. However, I believe that Exemplar of the Kalyan is restricted to Sept, the ability to redeploy those units. So because you don't have Tau Sept units in there, you won't be able to do it if you're allying her in. So that's another hit against her in an allied army.
If you take Tau Sept, though, she's not...
She's a good commander.
She's good.
She's got 2 fusion, tie-intensity fusions. She's got a light missile pod and a flechette launcher. And then she's got 2 drones. She has always -1 to be hit. And one of the drones gives her, you can't be targeted unless you're within 18, I believe. 18 or 12.
I think it's 18. I think it's 18.
So she can just hang out in your backfield and just control an objective. And the other drone gives her +3 inch range to her auras. And if she's in Tau Sept attachment, there's another +3 inch. So she could easily be buffing things
from like 12 inches
from 12 away. So a nice, 24+ inch bubble. Very easy to get your buffs out.
Yeah. She is very good.
150 points.
She is very good. If she wasn't forced to be your warlord, she would be in my lists 100%. I think Chapter Master is very strong on a Ballistical 4 army.
Yep.
In my opinion. Is she also a Crisis Commander?
No. She has her own. She's a Stalker XV-22.
Sure. But I would include her as like in a Supreme Command. She'd be the third commander. She'd be very, very good. I think she'd be a solid include in the list.
Yeah, she's the third commander option in my opinion. You run the Crisis, run the Cold Star, and this is in especially Tau Sept, then you run the Supreme Command and you get her. So you don't have to pay for a third detachment.
The main issue is how absolutely insane Tau Warlord traits are. Their relics are fine. Their Warlord traits come at a premium because they are very, very good. Exemplar of the Montka is you target a unit, and if you're within 12 of an enemy, you get full rerolls to wound. That's going in my list. Precision of the Hunter is full rerolls hits and wounds for a commander who has 4 weapons and then potentially is also good in combat. That's going in the list. So the last one, she's competing. Her Exemplar of the Kalyan, which doesn't do very much, is competing with some good ones, such as through Unity Devastation. An aura of 6s to wound our AP1, which is very good in a high output, low AP army. Or what's the one for?
There's a 6s to hit or auto wounds.
That's right.
That one I really like, especially on the airburst unit.
It's pretty crazy there, although she would be the best combo with it, which is a little sad.
With Chapter Master, yeah.
Yeah. Then there's also some really, really good ones in Montka and in Bork-Khan. And both of those are really good, and she would conflict with you taking any of those. You're still taking Exemplar of the Montka, you're still taking Precision of the Hunter. Those are pretty clearly the 2 best in my mind.
Yeah.
But she conflicts with you taking it. But Chapter Master is so strong in this army, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, if you could have spent a CP like some other factions had, like the Marine ones, to double a Warlord trait, and that would get you an extra one, that would be super powerful in Tau, and then she would be more palatable.
For sure.
I just because you're not if you were to plan around taking Kalyan more often, the redeploy is actually quite good there. I really like it there, but with only 1 unit, I don't think it's good enough.
And it's Sept locked, right?
Yeah.
So if you ally her in, she can redeploy herself.
Yeah. I think she's better than Farsight. I think
for sure. Yeah.
I think she's strong. You're going to see her definitely in Tau Sept lists. Outside of that, you'll see her allied in occasionally, but not an auto include like the other commanders.
Regular commanders are just so strong.
It helps that the Warlord traits and relics are just so good, and the flexibility of choosing what you want is very good. So she's strong. She's very good.
If you consider her Warlord trait to not be Exemplar of the Kalyan, heck with that. If you consider her Warlord trait to be Chapter Master, she could potentially earn the 3rd slot.
Yeah, but that's where she's a 3rd slot commander.
100% 3rd slot.
It's the fact that the Crisis and Cold Star and Enforcer have such good data sheet abilities to buff other Crisis suits. If she had something similar, then she would be on par with them.
Yeah, because she's above Farsight, and Farsight has the Crisis Commander data sheet buff.
Yeah.
So that should tell you something about how good reroll hits is in Tau.
Full rerolls to hit is amazing.
It's amazing. She is the 3rd one. She's not your 2nd. She's not your 1st. She's your 3rd if you're taking that.
But yeah, Supreme Commander lets her be more flexible than Farsight, who's stuck to
also costs less CP, which is nice.
Yeah, so you will see her much more often, and she is very strong.
Now that we're talking about her, I actually kind of want to run her. She seems pretty good with the full reroll hits. But moving on.
All right, next up we got Anva, the Space Pope himself.
Oh, Space
He knows
Pope.
3 invocations. We talked about them before with the regular ethereal.
Can he cast 3 or cast 2?
Cast 2.
Okay.
You could spend the 2 CP to auto cast, the one you don't try.
And he casts on 2s.
But you're doing a 1 CP power, so
yeah.
You got -1 to hit, 5 pain, +1 CP. Pretty much going to stay with those.
Probably.
And then the other thing I didn't mention about the ethereals is they pick a unit and it can shoot and do actions. That's
which is pretty good when you're getting aggressive with a crisis suit unit that wants to start doing retrieve Knockman data in a quarter, and your opponent's like, does that mean they're not shooting? You're like, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super good ability to have. The fact that they have that on top of the invocations, there is an invocation to shoot and do actions as well, so you could potentially be doing it on multiple units. Not really necessary, but there are a couple missions out there in the new mission set that have the addendum to the primary, the extra points, are related to actions, like the tear down their icons with the deploying the bombs. So that combination could be very powerful, but the other invocations are a little too strong, are much stronger in my opinion. Yeah. They're automatic.
Yeah.
3 of them are just so strong. Then on top of that, he's -1 to wound. He's got an invuln. He's got 2 bodyguards that have a couple attacks at strength 6, AP 1, 2 damage. And his warlord trait, I believe, is he through Unity or is he 6 to wound to auto wound?
I think he's through Unity, but don't quote me on that.
I think he's through Unity. So it's also not a bad warlord trait if you were only running 2 other characters. You could still get a pretty decent one.
It's weird that he can't be a Supreme Commander.
But he has
I would have thought.
He has the rule to get in.
So he can't conflict with Shadow Sun, which would be very nice if you wanted to include both of them. Because you can ally him into another army, and then if you could conflict him with Shadow Sun, I would definitely want to do it. Let me see. Anva through Unity.
Yeah, through Unity. So it's still not the best of the warlord traits, but still a good aura to have, especially if you run a lot of I see people wanting to run a lot more flamers, a lot more burst cannons. That's where I'd be really considering through Unity Devastation.
For sure. It's also pretty good if a lot of your units are going to be doing damage rather than just one at a time. I think he's a fantastic pick.
I think he's extremely strong. The only reason you might not see him is because of a particular wording that I believe is on Monka and Kalyan. If you want to pull that up.
Oh, right, I forgot.
You're 100% going to see him in a Tau Sept list.
1,000%. He doesn't cost you a CP, which is very nice. He doesn't cost you a CP to take the Humble Stave, which you are going to take on Ethereal.
So, Philosophies of War, this is the being able to choose Monkar or Kalyan, says if every unit from your army is from the same sept, then you get to benefit from the tactical philosophy you choose. He is Tau Sept, of course, and his qualifier to go in other detachments doesn't ignore the wording of Philosophies of War.
Wait, so if you ally in, if you Supreme Commander, Shadow Sun does the same thing?
No, because Shadow Sun is Shadow Sun's rule gets around it, I believe. Hero. Where is her ability?
I don't see anything about it.
Must be somewhere.
Well, we'll get back to it.
Yeah, we'll get back to it. But I believe that this wording is going to prevent... so where's his... This unit can be included in any Tau Empire detachment, excluding Farsight Enclaves, without preventing that detachment from being a Sept detachment, and without preventing other units from your army from benefiting from a Sept tenant, blah, blah, blah. They should have just put and...
You receive
Philosophies of War.
See, I don't think they saw that Philosophies of War get turned off if you ally in some of these characters. It's unfortunate oversight.
I think it's an oversight.
Is my guess.
Yeah, if they fix that, I think he's up here.
I don't know if he's in Torment Stable. I think he falls into the same category.
He is better than the regular Ethereal, and you don't have to spend a relic on him. He's only 20 points more expensive?
Yeah, he is 20 points more expensive. You don't have to spend a relic on him, which is nice.
The flexibility of having all three
That's
of the
true.
good...
You can put him into the same detachment, so he literally competes with an Ethereal in every list.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. If they fix that wording, he's in Torment Staples, for sure.
Because you get the -1 to hit there, just as if you need it. Yeah. And there are matchups where -1 to hit on a unit is so extraordinarily powerful.
Like, you're functionally spending 1 CP in order to get -1 to hit. Sometimes you will do that. He gets you the access to that. Because instead of casting the -1 to hit, you go... instead of casting the CP, you get -1 to hit instead.
So, I think he's alongside Shadow Sun in Strong. You're going to see him pretty often, and I think that fix will happen, and we'll see him even more.
Yeah.
But I think they just missed that. So, It's a little unfortunate, but Envoy is very good. His data sheet's awesome, very aggressively
strong,
priced.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Invocations are great. Whereas they were mediocre buffs in 8th edition. Darkstrider, he's another Tau Septim character. He is a Pathfinder character. He gets a reroll to hit and wounds along with his Tau Sept one, so he's super efficient. He's a 2 damage pulse rifle or pulse carbine, as Nick found out, or John found out, and then he gives out +1 to wound to a core unit.
That is very strong. How many points is he?
He is 60 points, I believe.
That is again aggressively costed. That's the price point you want for a buff stick. Literally, all he does is he throws out a marker light and he goes +1 to wound.
Yep, and he's
for
a
60
Pathfinder.
points, that's worth it.
He has the Pathfinder Vanguard rule, so he can deploy his marker lights at the end of movement. So he can move out and then go ahead
and he's a character. That's what he does. Is he's a character you can't shoot back, and he throws out a marker light and he gives +1 to wound. That's pretty much all he does.
In addition,
but
if there's core infantry around, the breachers and the fire warriors, not the battle suits, you get to fall back and shoot as well.
Oh,
so he's also helpful.
Okay, yeah, that is very helpful.
Yep.
But he himself doesn't do very much. He just gives out buffs. But the buffs he gives out are worth 60 points. Yep. If you're running Tau Sept, which is not on its face the strongest one.
It's one of the three.
It's one of the three, but it's probably the third. But you get access to the best characters. If you're running Tau Sept, I think you're taking Darkstrider. For 60 points, that's very aggressively costed.
Particularly if you're taking broadsides. I think he benefits the most from broadsides, because he does have to pick something that's visible. And that means broadsides are going to be able to shoot it if he's picking it.
Yeah.
So
the broadsides will pick it up.
So +1 to wound, yeah. So I think he combos extremely well with the broadsides, but he's just a very good generic character.
Yeah.
So I think, once again, if he's in Tau Sept, you're going to see him quite often.
Yep.
It's a very reasonably priced character.
Yep.
And
he throws out +1 to wound, which is the biggest thing he has over a Fireblade. And he's 10 points more expensive. I would love to upgrade a Fireblade to get +1 to wound for 10 points. And fall back and shoot.
You'll see when we talk about breachers, but I think the core battle suits are much stronger than the core infantry, the breachers and the strike teams. And his ability to particularly buff the battle suits at the +1 to wound is very strong.
Yeah, for
the
sure.
core ones, at least.
Yeah, it goes on core, which is, all the good units. So I think it's fine.
Longstrike is the last one. He's a hammerhead. He benefits. You can take him with the new upgraded railgun, strength 14, AP 6, ignores invulns, flat 6 plus D3 damage, and 3 mortal wounds. It's a good one-shot gun. They made a good one-shot gun.
This is the stats that a one-shot gun. We'll get back to this when we get to hammerheads. This is the stats that a one-shot gun needs to have in order to be remotely effective at killing tanks. It's not broken because it has a big number at the end. It's direct line of fire, which is unfortunate, coupled with a defensive profile that can be picked up, which makes it balanced. If it was indirect, then
no.
Gross, disgusting, obviously. But the fact that your opponent gets to dictate when you will get to see him and shoot him means it is balanced, not broken. But that is the stat line that a one-shot gun needed to have in order to be anywhere near good. One-shot guns at 3 damage, one-shot guns at D6 damage are atrocious. The old Hammerhead, you never saw it for like 4 editions because it was a single shotgun and it was anti-tank. This is what it took. Yeah. And they did it.
You get SMS on top of that. He's BS3, unlike the Hammerheads, which are BS4.
Yep.
In Tau Sept, he gets that nice reroll if you need it.
Yep.
And he also gets, I believe, +1 to wound against monsters and vehicles.
Very good.
He's a tank ace.
How many points is he?
He's 160 points. So he's 5 points more expensive than a Hammerhead.
You put a marker line on something, he hits on 2s rerolling. He wounds against monsters and vehicles on 2s. He has that free reroll. He is an excellent tank deleter.
Yeah.
Your opponents will get to dictate when he gets to shoot. But when he shoots, they will know.
On top of that,
for sure.
People have been mentioning it in chat. Yes, he interacts with the bodyguard keyword, which the bodyguard keyword is if you're within 3 inches of the bodyguard unit, then you cannot be if you're a character, you cannot be targeted by ranged attacks.
Yes.
So crisis bodyguard unit out of line of sight. There's no exemptions about vehicles, just like there isn't in Space Marines. You can have a Contemptor Dreadnought. That's a character in Iron Hands near the chapter. Chapter command. What are they called?
What's that? Sorry.
The Space Marine 2 bodyguard.
Company veterans?
Company veterans.
Yeah.
So you can have vehicles being bodyguard in other parts of the game. They haven't fixed that yet, even though it's been popular. So
it has been less aggressively weird than Long Strike being a tank sitting in the center of the board being like, nah, because I have a guy sitting behind a wall. That is weird enough where GW might take notice, which is fine. Bodyguard is not a rule that is particularly interactive, and I'm okay with it.
I'm shocked they haven't done anything about Bodyguard.
It's so weird.
It's such a strange, abusive rule, and Tau is one of the best armies at abusing it, so we may actually finally see an update to Bodyguard because of this book.
Honestly, this is what brings Bodyguard to the forefront, because it is the worst abuser and the worst hit by opponents using Bodyguard.
Yep.
Bodyguard is any rule that says if you're within 3 inches of a bodyguard and your character cannot be shot. So what it does not mean is if you're behind that bodyguarded unit or if the bodyguarded unit is visible. What happens is the bodyguarding unit is behind a wall, and then on the other side of the wall, in the open, is a character within 3 inches, but you can't shoot him because of rules. And Tau don't love that, but Tau do disgusting things with their bodyguards because their characters all have drones attached.
Yep.
And the drones aren't characters, but it is a character unit.
Yep.
So the drones do benefit to extend the range of that bodyguard.
Yep. And Long Strike himself is just a giant tank.
Gigantic tank who can just sit there and say, "What up, fool?"
There's also the question of whether the Tau Sept ability to add 3 to range of aura abilities benefits the bodyguard rule. The bodyguard rule in Tau doesn't have the tag, the parentheses with aura in it. However, the main rulebook defines auras, and it's any ability that affects multiple units in a certain range.
Yes.
And by that, it is an aura and should benefit from it.
Yes. Unless they explicitly say that it doesn't, it does.
So that it's going to come down to what your TO rules at the events on these things. I expect this to be one of the things Games Workshop actually answers, both Long Strike and the bodyguards, and whether bodyguard benefits from Tau Sept or not. So
this is the point where bodyguard goes from something that the top 2% of players use to win games to something that is prevalent. And is very in the open. So I think GW should see that and address it soon.
Yes,
hopefully.
I really think they need to. So Long Strike is 5 points more expensive than a Hammerhead. He's much better than a Hammerhead.
Way better.
If he's in Tau Sept, I don't think you need to take him, but he is strong enough to take in a list, and he does add a new dimension, because the Hammerhead, even if your opponent doesn't bring any tanks, so the railgun itself isn't great, they have the 1 CP submunition strat, and you could just do a bunch of mortals to something like a big brick of Skitarii Rangers. Just very useful.
We'll get to this back when we get to the Hammerhead. There was some confusion when Siegs, during the initial review, was sort of lukewarm to cold on the Hammerhead. The reason that it's not as good as some people might assume is because in top level games, people don't expose their units until after they've done something.
Or they expect them to die, but they're doing something that's going to make it fine that they die in return. Right.
You're never going to, with a direct line of fire piece like a Hammerhead, you're never going to get the jump unless they're running like Knights or Crusher or something.
But that's not you're not seeing that at the top tables. 4-0 to GT going into the final round. You're not seeing Magnus, Morty, a bunch of Knights.
No.
That's not what you're seeing.
At your local game store, maybe with worse terrain, people just leave their units out in the open. A Hammerhead is going to run the table on them. No questions asked. Long Strike is going to be amazing. In top-level tournament games, people do not expose their units until after they're comfortable with them getting shot back.
Now, the Hammerhead is actually a little more mobile, as you saw in the game that I played yesterday with Borkon.
Yes.
Where in Monka, I can just advance and then fire as if it was stationary. So even on heavy terrain like GW terrain, you can kind of get angles if you leave it relatively central. And there's some nice forests on the back edges, so you can give it extra defense. I actually didn't mind it in Borkon with forest on GW board plus the -1 strength. The Hammerhead doesn't actually die.
You also never missed one of your critical shots, which is a big thing about Hammerheads.
I did miss once.
You missed once, but he was tabled at that point, so I think it was fine. You also hit on Overwatch, you cheeky son of a gun. But I think that's enough talk about the generic Hammerhead. We will get back there in a bit. I think Long Strike is definitely strong if you're running Tau Sept.
I mean, honestly, because we talked so much about the Hammerhead, let's just do it now.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing is it hits on 4s and it has a reroll.
Yeah.
So there's a 25% chance that your tank just does nothing and gets picked up in response. That is not good. Long Strike can go to hitting on 2s with a reroll, so fine, we'll let that pass. He wounds on 2s with a reroll. So his damage is very consistent, but the regular Hammerhead is much less consistent. Even hitting on 3s with a reroll is far from guaranteed. even an 8 out of 9 chance means it's a 1 out of 9. It does absolutely nothing. So it also usually doesn't one-shot vehicles, although it can. Yep. It will itself get picked up in response because it is 13 wounds with a 3-up, toughness 7. It will get killed if it exposes itself. It has to take like really narrow angles, at which point the amount of targets it's actually good against kind of narrows. It's good against main battle tanks that your opponent is exposing on their flanks rather than in their center. Usually people's main battle tanks all cover each other. Like you shoot one, the other ones can move to see down that line of sight and will clip your hammerhead in response. Yeah. Does the hammerhead actually shoot harder than a Lehman Russ Demolisher with double exploding 6s and reroll 1s? Probably not, actually. Yeah. So if you evaluate it through that lens, even though it is one shot and has a ludicrous damage number at the end of it, there is a chance that the damage is 0, which is very bad when it happens. There's a decent shot of that happening. It also is one shot, which means that is the damage it's doing. Whereas 2d6 rerolling the number of shots with double exploding 6s and reroll 1s and d6 damage is likely going to do more than a hammerhead's railgun, but it has a big number, so people freak out about that, which is human. That's human nature. But we feel like, where would you put it? Situational but good?
I think it's situational but good.
That's probably where I would end up with it too.
Honestly, in the case where you're seeing a lot of Horde 11 plus model units, that is where I really like the submunition strat. Being able to just pop that off turn after turn. If
it didn't have submunitions, I think both Farsight, or I think Longstrike and Hammerhead would move down a tier each.
But the submunitions actually gives it an interesting dimension that can help into other matchups, specifically units that, if Airburst ever gets toned down, that's a really great strat to have in the back pocket. Yeah. So, but I like solo Hammerhead is not horrendous. Running for Longstrike and 3 is just not going to be a thing. Yeah. All right, I'll place it again later, but this is where we will place the Hammerhead.
We did a full discussion on it. Hammerhead discussion. Because the internet obviously freaked out about it when it came out.
Yep. Let's go ahead and move on into our troops. So we've got Breachers and Strikers. So Breachers, they used to have 3 profiles, now it's just 2, but each one has AP, and they can benefit from AP from Oncot. It's still an assault weapon, so they can advance and shoot it. Breachers are quite strong. I really like them in the custom set, being able to get up to strength 7.
They seem pretty good at that, yeah.
I tried the Breacher Rush with the Devilfish several times, and the problem I found is that, yes, it can do a lot of damage. It can pin the opponent back, and it can give you some good board control. And notably, if you go first and use the 9-inch pregame move in Monka, and then the Disembark strat. However, I found that it's still hard to get marker lights back there, so you're not hitting at your max efficiency outside of Farsight Enclaves. And even then, there are armies that have good early game defensive mechanics to kind of minimize it. In those cases, you commit your army, you do some damage, and then all of that gets picked up.
All of it.
All the Devilfish, all the Breachers.
Yeah, you don't get to leave your army within 8 inches of your opponent on the crackback and expect to live.
And the worst part about that is your opponent gets to play in a nice defensive position, do all their damage to your forward aggressive units, and just stay defensive from the rest of your units.
It's super easy to not get in line of sight of broadsides in the backfield while killing 30 Breachers, 3 Devilfish, and then passing the turn back to you with 600 points, your army dead.
And I found that going second, it's just not the same at all. So I don't want to pay 600 plus because you have to run 10-man Breacher squads now.
And I'm assuming you're running a Farsight.
Probably running the Fireblade with this combo. So it's over 600 points. That's a huge chunk of your list. And for it to be able to die quite easily because it has the worst defense of the Tau, the good stuff.
Yes, exactly.
I just am not convinced in it. In addition, you're going to see a lot of armies start pivoting towards having more forward deploy units. And Tau armies especially have things like Kroot with their Vanguard move, and they also have stealth suits. They're going to be able to mitigate that Alpha Strike, and then now you have 700 points of stuff that isn't great in the Tau mirror matchup because it just instantly dies when it commits itself.
It is weird that Tau are one of the best armies at stopping the Devilfish Rush because they have so many forward or pre-game move or forward deploy units that can then move up, body block that out, and then your opponent is left like either they commit and they pick up like 30 Kroot, which whoop-de-doo, and then you kill 600 plus points of their army and you're take a commanding lead.
Yeah, there's no because that's a lot of their speed elements. That's a lot of their obsec, like Guiding Olive's pointing out. And if you trade that early and don't have that, that's one of your best comeback ways is putting a cheap unit out there trying to play the slow trading game.
100%.
You can't do that if you just put your army out there.
Yeah. It's just too much of your army to sacrifice. It's basically one shotgun, pew, that is trying to take a chunk out of your opponent's army. It's not a repeatable damage source at all. And that typically will fall off as your opponents get better, because all they need to do is stop you from doing enough damage one time, and then they'll kill all of it.
Now, Jack and I are speaking from the perspective of like top table games. We're trying to win super majors here. We're trying to win majors. In the case of this book, breachers are they are strong.
Yes.
And you're going to see them in most lists. Same with the
sure.
Devilfish.
I would not feel bad about including them in your army if you are. This is not a blanket condemnation of them.
So, and then in addition, the strike teams, I think they are as good because they can let you play that defensive style a little better. I like their inbuilt AP in the range game that they let you play. So if you want to run those troops over Kroot, I think they are good enough to run. Because strike team's only 20 points more expensive than Kroot and do a heck of a lot more shooting damage.
For sure. They do actually contribute to your shooting.
They have better defense as well. So I think the troops are just strong. You're going to see them in most lists.
I think they are. I think we're talking about what's the absolute pinnacle of competitive viability in Tau. I don't think it's Breacher spam. I don't think it's Breacher rushdown. But that's not to say it's not strong. And that's not to say
it's going to win you games.
Exactly. It will win you games. You will play it. You will cripple your opponent turn one. And you'll be like, what are those Art of War boys talking about?
Yeah.
6 rounds, 9 rounds at a tournament, you have to keep that damage up every single game.
Or
and
at least,
much worse going second.
Yeah, or at least minimize the damage that you take in return for the trading pieces you put out there.
Exactly. Which is just... It's the consistency isn't quite there, although the power is.
Next up, the other troop is the Kroot themselves. Kroot are still 6 points per model.
Yep.
They've got their pregame move.
Yep.
They went up to 2 attacks, and they have AP in combat now.
Which is adorable when it comes up.
And baseline on their data sheet, they have the +1 save if they're benefiting from cover. So they can just go to a 4-up in cover. It's not bad. There are some buffs in the book for them, but I honestly don't think you ever go for them.
Nope.
And you just keep these a super cheap screening unit. You've seen them game after game, and it keeps happening to be against Nick, but I think also against John. The Kroot just a couple Kroots survive. They walk onto an objective. You airburst whatever your opponent had on that objective, and the Kroot give them a 4 on primary.
Yeah, I wasn't interested in letting Kroot deny me, so I just had them kill me instead. I was like, you can't steal objectives from me if I'm dead.
So, Kroot they just survive for how cheap they are, unlike the Breachers, which 85 points for 10 Breachers, 60 here. The points do add up because Tau have a lot of really good bonus things to add, like prototype weapon systems and drones.
Commanders that get very expensive.
Yep. Yeah. So I am a huge fan. I think you're going to see this Kroot in almost every single
I think they're a tournament staple for sure.
The forward deploy.
The forward deploy is
not
so
forward deploy,
good.
pregame move.
Pregame move, yeah. It's so good. Moving 7 before the game starts, after you know who's going first. You're running a cheap 60-man unit out there, or 60-point 10-man unit out there to touch multiple objectives turn 1, and you pass the turn back to your opponent. You're like, all right, would you like to expose something to kill these Kroot? And then I will shoot that thing and start the trades rolling from there.
Yep.
Or would you like to let me get all those points? The decision really is up to you.
Exactly.
And it's just super strong, honestly. And they're OBSEC too, so they just hide behind a piece of terrain. Your opponent is going to have a hell of a time digging them out. Because they have a Tau army just poke, shooting them from across the board. And they're going to have a hell of a time digging those Kroot out, and then the Kroot just move forward, charge onto an objective, take the objective away. The key in a Tau army is to not fall behind on points as you're killing your opponent's army. And Tau help that plan, or don't even help.
The Kroot, yeah.
Kroot. The Kroot don't even help with that plan. They are that plan. You need OBSEC that is cheap enough to go forward, cheap enough to sacrifice, and keep the points lead even until your crisis suit units, your commanders, can start taking objectives late in the game after your opponent is crippled.
And on top of that, a lot of the new missions have actions, especially actions where you want to have OBSEC. Kroot also do them exceptionally well because they can get up into an advanced position and be able to do them very early on. Like the tear down their icons, once again, Kroot are heroic on that type of mission.
For sure.
So I think you're going to see at least one unit, if not 2. Like most of my patrols have Kroot in there.
Yeah,
you don't have to spam.
100%.
I'm not trying to run 100 Kroot here, but a couple units of
300 Kroot for Nick.
300 Kroot for Nick. So I would never, if you told me in 8th edition that 9th I would be putting Kroot in a tournament staple, I would have told you were crazy, but they did it. Games Workshop did it.
Well, Crew used to be the troops of choice.
I'm saying from 8th edition.
Oh, from 8th edition for sure not. But like in 6th and 7th, they were the troops of choice because they were cheap and they just filled the troop slots, and they still do that.
Like I said, Breachers and Strikes aren't that much more expensive, and you do get a lot more shooting value out of them. But saving those points, Tau have a lot of things they want to upgrade and add extras onto. The Crew really do. That's where you shave the points, in my opinion. And if you just forget that Crew can do damage and just use them as a mission playing tool, they're so good at it.
Yep, 60 points. They fill a troop slot. They pregame move. They take objectives. Like, what else do you really need?
Nothing
they don't
else.
do damage, but they can kill like some things in combat.
All right, we got the elite slots here. Let's go with the stealth suits.
Love them. I think they're great.
I think this is a unit that's actually a little underrated.
Yep.
So what are they baseline? They still have their 3-up armor save. They get the extra save and cover. They're -1 to hit all the time.
Even in combat.
Yep. And on top of that, burst cannons got upgraded, 2 extra shots, and they benefit from AP now from Monka.
Yep. It's pretty easy to get them up to AP2.
Because there's a core strat that can help, or a strat that can help them.
If you have through Unity, those can be AP3 on 6s to wound,
Yep.
which starts to add up really fast. I think they're great. I used to run... I did actually used to play a little Tau. I used to run before the rule of 3 was a thing. Shush you. Before the rule of 3 was a thing, I would run 6 squads of 3 of them. Because they were just obnoxious to kill for their points. And they've only gotten better at that. And their shooting was fine. And now it's better. And they now have AP, which is great.
Yeah, they're 25 points, so they're a little pricey for an elite body, but it's two wounds, the good save, the -1 to hit. I think they're very reasonable for where they're at, and in addition, they get some very good abilities. Forward deploy.
Yep.
So this is your unit that can, on something like a sweep and clear style table quarters mission, they can just be on the objective on your half of the board outside your deployment zone. Just start there. They're very good. They're a little less good on the vital intelligence, the data scry.
They're not OBSEC.
Because they're not OBSEC, so they don't give you sticky, but sticky objectives.
Yep.
But they're still very good for holding that down, and they can just stay up there, force your opponent to have to commit a lot of resources. The -1 to hit is super good in the mirror matchup, where you're seeing a lot of indirect fire, and they're also T4.
You know what else they're good in? They're good with the Borcon or the custom set trait for -1 strength on incoming weapons, strength 7 or less.
So good.
Because strength 5 goes from wounding on 3s to 4s, strength 4 goes from wounding on 4s to 5s, and strength 3 goes from wounding them on 5s to 6s. So 5, 4, and 3 all get significantly worse, and they're -1 to hit. So yeah, in the Tau Mirror, they are a nightmare to try and get rid of because they just dig in, they kill Kroot, they're on objectives. Your opponent has to commit real shooting to deal with them, in which case your real shooting gets to shoot their real shooting, which is very strong. I love them. I love the little
That's not even it, Jack.
guys.
That's
Plus,
not even...
You can put a paint scheme on them where it looks like they're decloaking. I mean, how much more do I need to say?
That's still not it. You can put 2 drones in the unit.
Yes.
All right. So what I like is a 4-man unit, 2 drones. That means it's a 6-man. That means it can automatically do retrieve Nachman data. Which
Drones
I think
by themselves cannot do retrieve Nachman data. But as Siegs is saying,
it's a battlesuit unit.
Exactly. And you have 6 models, so it retrieves Nachman data by itself. And
there's a stratagem. Guess what?
Oh boy, is there a stratagem?
Tau did get the strat for ghost kills or stealth suits. 1 CP if they're within 9 inches of battlefield edge. Go into reserve. The next turn they can come down anywhere on the table, more than 9 away, but also within 9 of a board edge. So it's very much like the Admech Taraxi strat. It's a little like that, but it's like the Sikaran strat, not the Taraxi one. And it's the best way to guarantee that you're going to get retrieve Nachman data, because even if you take 2 cheap Vespid units, your opponent can screen you out those first 3 turns. By turn 4, they've run out of screens, and they can't hold their backfield down. That's where the stealth suits can come up, use the strat, and then finally come down the following turn, finish off in the last one, and done.
Very strong at that.
I think this whole package is extremely competitive.
That's not even all of it.
No.
Let's say you're running a crisis suit unit, a big one.
Yep, there's another upgrade.
Right? You leave them in reserves, and your opponent's like, all right, sweet. This guy has his biggest unit in reserves. I'm going to pressure him out of the game. I'm going to go all in. Well, if only there was some way to work around that, Siegs. Is there?
It's the homing beacon. So it's
the
a 5-point upgrade.
More like the homie beacon, because it's there and got your back.
You do your action in the movement phase, and then they come down that turn. And it says, even if it's the first turn, they can still come in. So big unit of crisis suits loaded up with plasma cyclic ion. I love this combo specifically in Farsight Enclaves because the Home and Beacon and Manta Strike Both give you access to the drop zone clear strat for full rerolls to hit and wound.
Yep.
Combo's amazing. But it's
strong.
a 5-point upgrade. I love it as just a defensive tool. If my opponent does really want to... When your opponent's sitting across the table and they just see there's guns everywhere, I want to shut down those guns, right? They're going to come and get aggressive and try and tie you up.
Yep.
Well, they see a big unit out of reserve, and they go into the middle of the table. Maybe they put like 9 Custodes bikes in the center of the table, and then you're like, cool, pass turn. And then you bring the scary units down, you put all the shooting out, and you do crippling damage. That's what the homing beacon allows.
I'm having like nom flashbacks right now. That happened in one of our war room games. I decided to stress test the Tau army because it looked like a lot of strength 4 and strength 5, and I was like, I don't think that's that great into bikes. Spoiler alert, it was. And now I know that for events going forward when I play into Tau.
This unit is amazing.
Tournament staple, 100%.
I don't know if you'll see multiple units, but one for sure.
I think so. I actually like multiple units.
I've been thinking of multiple ones, but I haven't gotten the chance to test that yet.
You deploy them into the center of the table, 2 squads of 4, right, with the 2 drones. Yep. Turn 1, you move them up. They're within 18 inches. You get marker lights. If you're in Farside Enclaves, you don't need them because you're hitting on 3s. You have a commander up there for reroll 1s. You're wounding on 3s usually, rerolling 1s. You then spend 1 CP, so both units get an additional point of AP. And that's a lot of shots going downrange at your opponent. Turn 1 from these cheeky little boys. Who, by the way, cost 100 points a unit plus the drones. Which, if that's a 4-man, a 4-man would cost 100 points
and
plus
then the
drones.
Homing beacon. Yep.
And then the homing beacon. So 105, 129 for a squad of 4 with a homing beacon and 2 drones.
2 shield drones.
2 shield drones. That is very aggressively costed. And it's also not easy to get rid of, right? They have a 1-up saving cover, I believe. Yep. So that's really annoying. And they're -1 to hit, and the Borcon and everything. Very strong unit. Love it.
Yep. They are much better than they were in 8th edition. So
yes.
You are going to see them quite often, in my opinion. All right. We've got the Firesight Marksman. This guy comes with the sniper drones. He's a character. He's a marker-like character. You can't target them unless they're within. I think you're within 12 of them.
Can you target the drones?
Eligible. No, they're just a single unit, and it's a character. It's once again a character unit.
Interesting. This is one of the units I had not actually really looked at out of the book.
It's 72 points for the package. Like, it can just sit in your backfield and be untargetable, and be a good screen back there.
Objective, shoot a little bit.
The problem is they're competing in that job with the Crude Hounds, and the sniper drones just don't do enough, in my opinion. Their profile still isn't that great.
They hit on 4s, probably, I think, right? Does he even have a drone controller?
I believe he does have a drone controller.
So they hit on 4s, 3s, and marker lights.
I hope he has a drone controller.
My God, please have a drone controller. He would be in YGWY if he doesn't have a drone controller.
Yeah. If you have to have an entirely different unit.
You were just assuming that he had one. He does not. He's a drone uplink. Oh, they hit on 3s.
Yeah, okay.
They hit on 3s.
I knew he had some benefit.
So they hit on 2s with a marker light, which if you're shooting at characters, you won't have a marker light on the character. So you're hitting on 3s. I don't believe they're core, which means that they're hitting on 3s. Natively, they will do mortal wounds on 6s. They're not terrible.
Yeah, it's not bad. I've thought about putting this package back there, but I always go back and look at something like the Crew Hounds, which we'll get to, or Stealth Suits, and I'd rather just put the points there because they're better units. It's
more about abusing the fact they can't be shot than it is using their shooting, because their shooting is fine.
It's okay.
I
think you're going to see them in Rarely Seen along with the Shaper. It's not overcosted. I think it's actually pretty reasonable for what you get. I just don't think it's solving a thing that Tau need.
Yeah, it is overcosted by comparison. If you grade on a curve, it's overcosted. If you look at the rest of the game, probably not.
I would rather just have
the
Crude up here. I would rather pay 10 more points and get a strike team. This doesn't do enough for me, unfortunately. That's just my opinion. Now we've got else in the elite slot, Crisis Suits. Get ready for this. We kind of talked about them. We talked about the commander buffs that can go on them. Amazing. You can have this unit ignoring any modifiers.
Or really anything your opponent wants to do.
They can move up to 18 inches. They can strike and fade. They can have a 5 of Pheno Pain, -1 to be hit. This unit is awesome. They could come in from reserve, do drop zone clear and Farside Enclaves. You can get them hitting on 3s very easily, rerolling 1s from your commanders, or with drop zone clear, full rerolls to hit and wounds. The unit is great. The regular Crisis unit, that one can take 3 weapons and then an upgrade.
Right.
So
the weapons could be an upgrade if you felt like it.
So what I like is, you could spend more on the upgrades. I like taking one cyclic and double plasma, keeping them relatively cheap, and then throwing a shield generator on there. But something like a multi-tracker is still very good. Target lock, not particularly on this unit, but it's a good upgrade. And then you also have the option of velocity trackers if there's a lot of fly units, especially fly with minuses inbuilt.
Let's say Eldar came out and they're all fly with -1 to hit. Velocity trackers really helps get around that -1 to hit because it gives you +1. Mark loads gives you +1. That's +2. You can only have +1, but +2 cancels out their -1. You still have +1, and you're still hitting dirty Eldar on 3s.
In the case where the Crisis Commander is buffing a different unit and you're running multiple Crisis units, velocity trackers on one in that type of meta could be very powerful.
For sure.
So the Crisis suits are just amazing. In addition, you have a Bodyguard, a Bodyguard version. They have 3 hard points instead of 4.
Right.
You basically are paying for the Bodyguard.
Right. Which 5 points for a Bodyguard. Let's treat the Bodyguards as already coming pre-built with a 5-point support system that just gives them Bodyguard. That is very, very good. So they're also solid as well.
Yep. Bodyguard can't be targeted by ranged attacks. We mentioned it before. Tau have large character units, either like physically in terms of long strike.
He's chunky.
In terms of the characters with drones inside of them. You have the character within 3 and the drone strung out, so you can very easily have marker lights in those units that can't be targeted back, so you can just hit anything in the open turn after turn. The Bodyguard rule is amazing, and I think you're going to see at least one Bodyguard unit and then a regular Crisis unit.
You should.
You
should see at least some Bodyguards. If you are watching this video and you are playing Tau and you have characters, which you should include Bodyguards, period. End of sentence. It is insanely good because it does not let your opponent target you in the open.
Yeah.
That's just a PSA. You should be including them.
The other thing is they can be a minimum squad of 2, and then you can take one drone, so it's a 3-man unit. Then they can actually count for engage if you end up taking that. They can just sit in a quarter. I really like having a 2-man that has double air burst and target lock.
I like
so
that
nice
too,
bit of little additional anti-infantry indirect fire. And they can just stay back. You're going to fire and fade the big Crisis unit, whether the one with the anti-tank weapons or the unit that I like, which is double air burst and flamer with target locks.
Or Siegs. Porque no los dos. Take both.
Yeah, and yes, I do. I'm a genuine believer in taking both of those.
Same here.
So, Crisis suits, in my opinion, are the best of the core units in this book.
Which is saying a lot. I think they are probably the second best unit in the book. After
all
the
the weapons are amazing.
All their weapons. No, I'm saying after commanders, which are basically Crisis suits but characters and hit on 2s. I think small units of Crisis suits good. Big units of Crisis suits good. Crisis suits with indirect anti-infantry weapons good. Crisis suits with direct fire anti-tank weapons great. It's like it doesn't matter. There's almost no way to kit them out that's bad. You'd have to really work for it. Triple fusion gun? Question mark?
Triple of any of the weapons gets very pricey on the third one.
You could consider it with, if you have like an extra 70 points, you could upgrade your squad to like a triple airburst. I wouldn't recommend it. You could upgrade them to triple cyclic. That's for the guys with a lot of points to burn. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, because that's an entire crude squad at that point. It's an extra screening unit, so... but every single weapon got upgraded from 8th edition to 9th, and so they're pretty much all good. I like being able to interact with... I think, terrain is a struggle for Tau, very dense boards.
Yes.
So being able to start whittling your opponent's key units down or units hiding out on objectives with the airburst is very powerful.
Yes.
And I think it's essential.
You need some form of indirect as Tau, period.
Yep.
Otherwise, your opponents can really abuse the fact that you can't shoot them.
Until they are
until
right
they're
on top
of you.
Yeah.
Or you have to go to them to dig them off of objectives. Well, with indirect, do not worry about that.
But I like putting the one flamer on there because it means with Overwatch they're quite scary. You could put the early warning override to make it free, but I found that they're getting so rarely charged anyway that I'll just spend the 1 CP when I actually need to.
Yeah, what you do is you tell your opponent, oh, they all have flamers, and your opponent will just not charge them. So, whatever, just ignore cover on that last guy. You have really sold me on those flamers. Those flamers are really strong when I've seen you use them.
Yeah, especially so because you're putting Exemplar of Monka on that unit. So when they're targeting that unit within 12, they're going to get reroll wounds, which also works in Overwatch.
Yeah, the Overwatch. So Overwatch is 5d6 plus 10 auto hits that re-roll to wound, and you're in range of Montcalm, so they're AP 1 at least, and ignores cover.
Yep, from the target lock.
So
love that package, and
yeah.
it keeps them nice and cheap, so you can put
It
points
really
elsewhere.
does. It keeps them around 300 points, I believe, for a squad of 5.
Yep, and
with
then,
five drones at the end.
Yeah, I like putting at least 4 or 5 shield drones in there.
Yeah.
But you could think about putting a potential marker light. If this is the unit you're going to use Strike and Fade on, you could think about putting some marker lights, because you'll put it out in the open and then Fire and Fade back behind terrain.
So the other thing is you can make this unit very tanky. If you want, like the direct fire unit probably takes shield generators.
5-point upgrade,
5-point
still pretty
upgrade,
reasonable for
4 up
4
invuln. One dude takes an Iridium shield generator. Or
He takes
Iridium armor.
2-up armor.
Iridium armor for 2-up armor. They're in cover for a 1-up. He takes a stim injector for 4-up feel no pain after he fails a save. He can bounce the first failed save with savior protocols. And all of a sudden, it's insanely hard to dig through this unit. Like, it's just much harder than your opponent's ready for, honestly. AP1 gets grounded into a 2-up in cover, so that's not doing anything. And then anti-tank gets bounced off a 4-up invuln, and then once it goes through, the first one is passed off. And then after that, a 4-up, you have a 4-up feel no pain to deal with, and he still has a 4-up invuln, and he still has a 1-up. It's just, not a lot is great at killing that, and it's deceptively tough to the point where your opponent will allocate shots to it. I know because I did it. Yep. Your opponent will allocate shots into it. Yeah, you see that chuckle? And then they will just not kill anything, and then the crisis suit unit is just right there going. You see that? You see that right there?
I mean, that's what they did.
This man is chuckling because he ended me.
So on that anti-tank unit, I like giving the Sergeant the Iridium armor for the 2-up, and then giving him the prototype for the stim injector, the once per battle for Pin of Pain. Just make him tanky as possible, because you don't really need the extra leadership bonus, frankly. And
especially if you have an ethereal.
You have to put the prototype on the Sergeant there.
Yeah. If you have an ethereal, they're lead 10. Like, you don't care. Drones don't even count, which means you can't fail morale if you're near that, because the most you can lose is 4, and then you're lead 10, so you don't care.
Yeah. And then on the other unit, somebody mentioned here, I like the Dominator Airburst, which is the prototype Airburst. If it hits, it does -4 leadership, and when you're running indirect fire, it's very, very useful for, I'm going to whittle 2 different units down. Both are going to have bad morale checks.
It is quite expensive. It's 25 extra points on top of an Airburst, which is not nothing. So just consider that when you're putting it in your list. It's not essential.
We did a Tau Clinic in the Worm last night and ranked it as, I think, the 4th prototype that you would want to take. But I think most of the prototypes are quite reasonable, and 4th is still pretty good.
Also, by the way, what we didn't say is all the battle suits and infantry and whatnot that are terrible in combat all have access to a -2 to charge.
There's a 1 CP strat to do -2 to charge. The infantry have a different strat, photon grenades, and then they also have the ability to do some pretty scary Overwatch, because the battle suits are infantry now.
Yes.
Which means they can hold steady for 5-up Overwatch.
Yep. So between Overwatch and the -2 charge and their innate durability, they are very hard to actually get enough units into combat with them to put them away in a turn.
Yeah.
And then with the Crisis Commander, they can fall back and shoot, or they can just shoot into combat.
Yep.
So they are very, very strong. One of the best units in the book. Love them, honestly.
Amazing.
They're so much fun, too, because they're so fast.
The mobility is off the charts.
I love mobility. Mobility is, A, the most fun thing, and B, mantra of competitive, like, top-level 40K is mobility wins games. Mobility wins games of 40K. These guys move 18, shoot, and then move 7 again. And it is really good to have that in your back pocket.
Got the Ghost Keel here. So the Ghost Keel has, it's not core, which is a hit against it, but it cannot be targeted because of its stealth drones if you're not within 18 inches.
Right, which is strong.
So it can kind of, in the early part of the game, it's not going to take much firepower. There's a 5 of Pheno Pain upgrade, the Flare Launcher, if Strength 7 or higher weapons shoot at it, I believe. And in addition, it just has 2 drones inbuilt. You can use Savior Protocols to help take away a dangerous shot. It has a decent weapon, 6 shots on the Cyclic, or I believe it's flat 3 on the Fusion now.
I believe it's 3 shots on the, I forget what it's called. It's the Cyclic Ion Raker is my favorite there.
Yep. And then you can upgrade. You can have 2 flamers on there, 2 fusions. So you can put out a decent amount of shots, but the lack of rerolls, especially on cyclic, they can overheat, is very annoying.
It relies on marker lights a little too heavily for me to be happy about it.
And it became a vehicle, so there's a bunch of rules in the game that get bonuses against vehicles. It used to just be a battlesuit and monster. Now it's a vehicle instead of a monster. So some downgrade, side grade there, I guess.
Yeah, defensively it's very strong. It is priced aggressively. Its offense is very hit and miss. So I would say Ghost Keel is super cool. Not quite as good because their damage output is just not reliable. Yeah. Full stop. It is not reliable at all. The most you can do is it hits on raw 3s and it wounds at strength 8 with no rerolls. You can get 1 reroll to hit or wound with Tau. You can get 1 reroll to wound with Farsight Enclaves, and if you're close to your opponent, turns 1, 2, or 3, you can get reroll 1s to wound with Mont Ka. You don't really want that. Ghost Keel is best outside of 18 because it can't be targeted, which is very strong. But Ghost Keel, their damage is just not there. Yeah. I just don't see
160 points is a little pricey for me as well, like compared to something like Long Strike or anything else in that category, like 3 Crisis Suits. I actually genuinely believe it's overcosted. It should be around 140 points instead.
Yeah.
With the lack of core. So I think this is one of the few units that is actually overcosted in this book. Not by a ton, but it is overcosted in my opinion.
I think when we get to the Riptide, we'll also...
We'll have some words with the Riptide.
Yeah.
I saw a question in here about Airburst on Overwatch. Even if you can't see the target, because it ignores line of sight, you can Overwatch.
Yes.
But you won't be able to shoot the flamers if you can't see the unit. The direct line of sight shots still actually need line of sight. Coming up, we've got a bunch of fast attack options here. So we've got the basic drone units. These aren't, you have to take 4 minimum unit.
They're not.
Drones are better, in my opinion. Gun drones are 8 now, markers are 10, and then the shield drones are 12. Shield drones have 2 wounds. You're going to see them in the other units. You could bring in like a 4-man unit of marker drones for 40 points, get you engage points, and drop some marker lights. Force your opponent to screen them if they
That's
want
fine.
to. It's fine. Yeah. You could bring a couple gun drones, do a similar thing. Or you could just have a couple shield drones lying around for savior protocols later on. Because the other units are going to be able to bring them, I don't think it's that necessary. I'd rather have, for my cheap screens, just save a couple points and get the Kroot Hounds. But it's definitely an option.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to fall into either purple or blue. Either overcost or really seen or situational but good. Probably, I'm just going to agree with wherever you end up.
I think you're going to...
Yeah, as I said, definitely overcosted, rarely seen.
It's not about being overcosted. I think the Ghost Keel is the actual thing that's overcosted here.
Yes.
You're not going to see them because these Kroot Hounds exist.
It is hard to call the Kroot Shaper overcosted 25. It's hard to call the other stuff
they're not overcosted.
72 or whatever. Marker drones for 40 points for a squad of 4.
Totally
Again,
reasonable.
Not overcosted. What a lot of these units fall into is their roles are being cannibalized by better units.
Yep. See this unit here? It has a marker drone in it.
Right.
These guys might have a marker drone in it. These guys might. And that's enough already. You don't actually need a crazy ton of marker lights now.
You do not. Especially when the marker lights you can take on commanders and that sort of thing cannot be shot back.
Because they'll be bodyguarded.
Or they'll be just regular character protected.
Yep.
And a drone unit can no longer tank for adjacent units. You get 1 and that's it. So a shield drone unit literally doesn't do anything, like a pure shield drone unit. So generally I would say they're an overcost or rarely seen. They struggle to find a purpose in most games. A unit of 4 marker drones coming down and doing stuff, not the worst. It's fine.
Yep.
Its slots are probably highly contested, but it's fine.
I've seen some people want to take the larger gun drone unit and then have some sort of drone controller and just put out a lot of strength 5, AP1, and Mont Ka.
I don't have a problem with that.
The problem is the crisis suits. They do that.
They do.
And they don't get shot back in return. Which, if they get shot back in return, the gun drones are just dead.
Yeah.
These guys don't.
I don't have a problem with a cheap unit of gun drones.
It's not bad. But
it's not terrible. Like, you take 8 of them for 80 points. You drone controller, marker light, they're hitting on 3s. They, 4 shots apiece, I believe? Mm-hmm. It's not terrible. It's not great, though.
Bodyguard's on the whole unit. It's a character unit, so it's bodyguarded. Even if the drones themselves don't have character.
Yes.
So 4 Kroot Hounds. These guys are 24 points. Yes. They have the pregame move. It's a small unit, super easy to hide. And instead of throwing away your OBSEC Kroot, you can throw away these guys turn 1 to prevent any sort of alpha strike potential. This unit is very good because it is simply cheap, and you have...
Yeah.
Tau lost the ability to run a lot of 5-mans. This is one of those just super cheap, I only have to take a couple models.
24 points for a unit of these guys is really good. They pregame move 7, they move 12, which means they can be up in your opponent's business, taking down, blocking their raise the banners. At 24 points, you're not really sad if they die. You're not sad at all. You'll blink and you won't even notice it. There's 72 points for 3 units of 4. So a squad of this just literally moving 7, turn 1, advancing, and just going and touching 2 objectives on your opponent's side of the board and saying you can't raise banners. Beautiful use of that unit. I don't care if they immediately die. I mean, I care. Obviously, I care deep down somewhere in here. I feel it, but I'm happy for them living their best life. Same thing. They get engaged really well. I don't believe they can do actions. Can they do actions?
They are beasts.
So most actions are off the table for them.
So if it's restricted to infantry, they can't. But if it's restricted to infantry, beast, or cavalry, or just any unit, they can.
The other biggest thing is that they are the first thing out onto an objective. They take an objective. Your opponent needs to find some way to take that objective back. And that opens you up to counterpunching.
They, in addition, Kroot have access, I didn't mention it before, access to a 6-inch heroic intervention strat. And I believe they get +1 attack with that. So you're probably not going to spend the CP because the CP goes elsewhere into these battlesuit units. But it's a potential thing that if your opponent puts like a cheap Voidsman at arms unit, I would 100% heroic the Kroot Hounds into it and kill them.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a very close fight.
No, these Kroot Hounds are good.
They've 2 attacks apiece, 3 attacks.
They might have 3. I think
they have 3 actually.
Yeah, they hit on
hitting
3s.
On threes,
they're AP1.
They're strength 4, AP1.
No, they're strength 3. I think.
Kroot Hounds.
I haven't used them in combat yet.
It doesn't come up very often because they are kind of. It's right here. Strength 3, AP1, 3 attacks apiece, hitting on 3s. So 12 attacks, 8 hits, 4 wounds. They have a 5-up save on the Voidsman. What did I say? 4 wounds. So a couple go down, then they hit on 3s back for whatever reason.
They're all dead, Jack. You're gonna fail.
All dead. I know I'm gonna fail all my saves. The main point is they are super cheap. They're super fast, and that's all you really need to know.
Yeah. That turn 1, I want to just throw nonsense onto the center to get Stranglehold. Welcome to Kroot Hounds.
Kroot Hounds.
So I think they're just as strong as Kroot themselves, just because of how cheap they are. They don't have OBSEC, which is why, and they don't fill that detachment slot that you need for troops in your patrols. So Kroot are a bit better in my opinion, but they're, in terms of how cheap they are, just a cheap disposable unit, which is how we typically think of Kroot, they are really quite strong.
They are the perfect thing to free up your better units, your crisis suits, your commanders, etc., your hammerheads, if you will, to go and do their thing, right? Your crisis suits, your good units, maybe your broadsides, whatever, get to do damage, get to engage the bulk of your opponent's army, while Kroot Hounds run around scoring points so you don't lose the game at the end of tabling your opponent.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're super good. When I have those, like that, I'm working on the last 100 points of the list, usually that's where Kroot Hounds start getting thrown in.
Yes. I would be very surprised if I didn't have at least 2 units in the list I run.
Then we have the Piranha, another fast attack unit. It gained a wound, so now it's 7 wounds, so it doesn't instantly die to like a Cognos Las Cannon or a Dark Lance.
Yep.
It's very fast. I believe it moves 16 inches.
It's a very
2 gun drones in
awkward amount of wounds. 7.
Yeah.
2 doesn't kill it even. 3 doesn't kill it even. D3 plus 3 can't kill it in one shot, as you were saying. So going from 6 to 7 is a big deal. Big deal. It buffs their it buffs how much damage they need to take against every single reasonable wound profile, which is nice.
Yeah, they have a Piranha burst cannon, not quite as good as the accelerator burst cannon on the Hammerheads or the Devilfish. It's still pretty decent, especially when you're in Monkar range. It's an okay unit for bumping into things and getting you like a turn 1 engage. 60 points for the unit. I think it's a little overcosted compared to some of the other stuff here, and some of the Forge World stuff can do a similar role to it, but it's not bad. I just feel like you're going to do it with Kroot Hounds for 24 points instead of 60 points.
I think it is overcosted. I think it and the Ghost Kill are actually overcosted.
Not by a lot.
Not by a lot.
Mind you.
Maybe 10 points a piece. Piranhas just don't do very much. They don't shoot very hard.
They shoot okay, but
They shoot all right.
Tower not lacking in anti-infantry firepower.
No.
And so the damage this puts out is just completely outclassed by the damage this unit puts out.
Yep.
And you're going to have this unit plus these guys.
And it's not like you're lacking for speed either, and they're just a little overcosted for what they do, in my opinion.
Yeah. I've thought about putting one like in lists. I've been like, turn 1 strangle, and then I just keep going back to
They're good for engage.
Yep.
Because they're vehicles, so they get engaged, whatever. They're not bad, but they are overcosted, I think.
Then we got Pathfinders. These are a good marker light source. They are paper thin, and they really need a Devilfish to help support them. But they have the Recon Sweep strat to go ahead and get +1 to their marker light ability. And then, in addition, they can make a normal move after it, so they can embark into something. They put out a decent amount of firepower. One of the drones gives Ignore Light Cover. Another one gives +1 AP. And then in Monka, they can be AP2.
I do like having inbuilt, or not inbuilt, but separate Fire and Fade. Fire and Fade that doesn't cannibalize the Fire and Fade that the Crisis Suit unit is using. I like having that. That feels very nice. It starts to get a little expensive, whatever. I wish they could be a 5-man unit.
Yeah.
I really do. If they were a 5-man unit, I would be all about them.
So they got that Vanguard movement. In addition to that, they have a couple new abilities. They have a grenade launcher, which you can either target something and have it count as half its wounds, I believe. It's like an EMP shot against a vehicle.
Pretty good.
And then there's the semi-automatic grenade launcher. The other profile is just a flat 3 damage shot. Cool. Rail rifles are now 5 points, and they're pretty good. You do the mortal on the wound. They're still high AP.
They fire and fade.
Yep. So with Recon Sweep, if you use that strat, they're okay. They're still pretty pricey when you actually start putting all the drones and stuff on there. It
ends up being like 130 points or something. Yeah.
So it's a little pricey, and they pretty much instantly die in return. They have the same problem that the Breachers have, in my opinion. But if you are doing the Devilfish plus Breacher combo, these guys are probably going to be in one of those Devilfish.
The difference between this and the Devilfish and Breacher combo is this does a Devilfish Breacher thing from further back.
Yes, it can do it from further back.
So it doesn't, your opponent won't instantly kill it because they hop out, they shoot, they make a normal move, embark back, and transport behind a wall. The problem is it's a lot of points and a lot of support for not quite as much payout as you might want for those points cost.
So the other thing about the unit is that it comes with the Grav Drone. It is nerfed from its 8th edition version, which was an aura of -D3 charges. Now it's -2 charges if you declare the unit that it's with. But you can't just single out the Grav Drone anymore.
Yeah. In your game against Nick, he got up to a theoretical -8 or something on a unit charging.
He could have been -6 in the forest.
Oh, because he was a vehicle.
Yeah,
and he couldn't be photon grenaded.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you can stack this. They are a photon grenade unit, I believe. So you could have some really nasty minuses to charge, which is just a great thing to have in your back pocket. It's
-4 to charge them. You don't take them. You don't kill them in combat, but they are very easy to kill and shoot.
Make sure they have the photon grenade.
Oh, they got it, right?
I mean, the Breachers and Strike Marines, strike teams definitely have it.
They do.
Yeah.
They have photon grenades.
I figured as much, but...
They also have Neuroweb system jammers. Like, they do a lot of cool things.
That's an upgrade, and that access the strat to give something... Also,
to get something -1 to hit, you target them and then -1.
It used to be -1 to hit. Now I think it has something to do with characteristics as well.
I looked at the rule. I don't believe. I think it's just -1 to hit. It's in your shooting phase, I believe, with an 18.
Still cool. It's like a bunch of cheap upgrades. I think these guys are, because they don't fill a necessary slot, I think they're a little worse than the Strikes and Breachers, even though they combo well with them. And because of how they have essentially no defense outside of using the Recon Sweep strat. I think they're situational but good.
It's on you target a unit with an 18 invisible to them, and on a 3+, they take -1 to their hit rolls.
Oh, it's on a 3+. I don't
love
it used
that.
to be automatic. Yeah, if I'm spending a CP, I don't like the things that are... If it's a 2-up and it's a good ability, I'll do it. Like the no fallback.
I won't be happy about it, though.
I won't be happy about it, but making me spend CP and roll, and on a third of the time I fail.
I have literally lost games in the finals of tournaments because a 1 CP or 2 CP 2-up to cause a thing to happen, rolled a 1, and then I lost.
When you want your Black Templar army to hold a bunch of orc guns in combat.
And I roll a 1, and then they fall back and they shoot me, then this is the same sort of thing. Obviously on less of a, less risk if it doesn't work. But it's the same sort of thing. You spend a CP and then you roll a 2 and nothing happens. Awesome.
All right, we got a couple more auxiliary units here. The Krutox. This is the one that I haven't run. It is 25 points for, is it T5, 4 wounds? It's
Back to the book we go.
it's something that
You can tell it's good because we don't know what it does.
I haven't played with it yet. It's just a meme. It has a Krutok's Fist. Does it still have Krutok's Fist?
It has Krutok's Fists, yes. It is toughness 5, 4 wounds with a 6 up save, which means it dies immediately. It has a Krut gun that is an autocannon that hits on 4s. This thing is not...
It's not as good as Krut Hounds. But
No.
it's still decent.
It's still ambushing predators. You can still take a unit of 1 for 25 points?
Yeah, I believe it's 25.
That is a lot. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. That is a lot of points for a single model.
It is not horrific. I don't think it's undercosted, but I don't think... You're just going to see Krut Hounds and Krut first.
It doesn't move as fast as Krut Hounds, and it can die to a single anti-tank shot, whereas for Krut Hounds, kind of...
If they put anti-tank that way, beautiful.
Awesome. But one Dark Lance can just be like, you're dead.
All right, here we go. Vespid. I think this unit is very good.
I think it is very good.
So, what is it? They went down 2 points a model. Now they're 12 points instead of 14. They still move 14 inches. They're infantry, so they can very easily jump over to actions.
They're great at actions.
6-man unit, very good for Retrieve Knackman because they have inbuilt Deep Strike. You don't have to spend any CP on them. And their weapons are much improved. They're AP 3 now and flat 2 damage.
Yes.
They're anti-elite killers now, so... They're much improved in that aspect. They did lose their strat from Psychic Awakening, which was 1 CP, full rerolls to hit. If they had that, they honestly would be all the way up here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you would see 10-man units.
But because they don't have that, I think they're just strong. You're going to see them in most lists because they do very good damage when you need them to. Great action monkey, regardless of what action you're thinking about. They're just good at all of them.
So, yeah, they're mostly there for the actions and being cheap and being fast. But then when you need them to punch, they shoot. They shoot pretty good. Solid. Nothing really to write home about.
They really transformed the auxiliaries. Yeah.
Yeah. Vespid were a joke forever, and now they're strong in most list tier.
I did run them early 9th to get Retrieve. Because it was a 4-man unit that could just come in from Deep Strike. But now they're actually...
Now it's a 6-man unit, but they're one of the better ones damage. Yeah.
All right, we're going on to the heavy support slots here. We've got, let's just go with the Sky. We talked about the Hammerhead. If you want more discussion on it, go back to when we talked about Long Strike. But we're putting it situational but good.
Yeah, we go in detail about why we think this is where it is. That was
just
about
Long
an hour
Strike
ago,
has
I think.
Type, yeah.
Yeah. Long Strike.
We're still going, baby.
We're still going.
We got the Forge World. Well, don't worry. Forge World will be quick.
Oh, yeah. The problem is this is a lot of fun to talk about, so now we're an hour 40 in.
Shockingly nothing down here, but get ready. There will be some.
There will be some in there, yes.
Skyray is not one of those things.
No.
The Skyray has access, so they changed it. It used to be you shoot your missiles, you're done. The Skyray is just a platform walking around with some missiles, with some marker lights. Still has the marker lights. It now shoots D3 plus 1 missile a turn, so minimum 2, up to 4.
I thought it was D3 plus 3.
It's D3 plus 3?
I thought it was.
If it's D3 plus 3, I'm taking it.
Yeah, I was thinking about taking it in my list.
I thought it was D3 plus
1. No, it's D3 plus 1. Don't listen to me. Oh, I thought it was... Oh.
If it was minimum 4 missiles, I would absolutely...
am significantly less jazzed about this than I was about to be.
So, but it has a very good strat to get plus 1 to wound on the missiles and ignore line of sight. That strat dramatically increases the utility of this unit. I still think it's situational but good.
I think
because it has a similar problem to the Hammerhead. But that strat is very powerful. Just like the strat with the Hammerhead, I'd probably put them down here without those strats. But up here, I think they're actually... You can put it in a list. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to hurt your list. It's adding a tech piece that you think you really want.
I want to put it in YGWY just to punish it for my lack of reading comprehension.
All right. We got the Riptide. Riptide was one of the mainstays in the previous edition. Can no longer get a 3-up invuln. Just has a 4-up now instead of a 5-up.
Yep.
Perfectly fine.
Perfectly fine. It has the ability to get access to a 5-up Feel No Pain, which makes it comparably tanky to the 3-up invuln before.
The Nova boosts are move 2d6.
Yeah.
You've got the 5-up Feel No Pain and then the ability to boost its weapons. The problem here, it's not core, so it doesn't benefit from a lot of the rerolls or the really good buffs that you're putting out. In addition, it's still pretty pricey. It's around 240 points, which is expensive for something without rerolls. And you probably want to take the Ion because that medium type of damage profile is already mastered by the Crisis Suits and Commanders.
Crisis Suits are insane at it.
So you're probably taking the Ion, which goes when it's overcharged flat 4 damage. The problem there is with the no rerolls.
It doesn't hit.
It can start taking Immortals, and then it can fail its Nova Charge. Then you can use the strat. But
it also, if it was core, it would be good. It's still very expensive, so don't get me wrong. But it would be good because it is non-interactive shooting because it moves 2d6 after it shoots. So you move it forward, touch a piece of terrain, see through it, shoot, move back. And then your opponent can't see it back. The problem is its damage output is just not there because it has no rerolls. It's the same thing as the Ghost Keel. And it is 240 points, which, again, same thing as the Ghost Keel. It is expensive and does not have the damage output that you need.
It's a BS4 platform, and in addition, it really wants marker lights to get to hit on 3s. The problem is you're only running a certain number of marker lights, and if you're running a lot of marker lights, the extra ones are going to die. The Pathfinders, the marker drones that are in their own units.
So by the end of the game...
So consistently, you're not going to get the extra damage out of it, and that's a huge deal. Part of the reason the Riptide was good in 8th edition was... had a lot of drone support. You can throw the 2 shield drones in here and use save protocols when needed to keep it alive. 4 up Invul and 5 up Pain. Still pretty good defense. But it doesn't have a pile of shield drones. And in addition, the thing about Riptides was they did consistent damage turn after turn. They got rid of the key threats that either hurt your drones or the ones that hurt your Riptides. They picked one, focused on it, and then from there, your opponent couldn't deal with the other type of unit. Right. Doesn't really work here, and its damage roll is just filled by these units up here.
And it is so expensive right now. You could theoretically think you're including one. I wouldn't hate you for it. Before you include the Riptide in there, I would just like to note that it was perfectly balanced as all things should be.
It was.
We have not planned that at all. It's just there's good internal balance.
Bless you.
Thank you. I'm just getting too excited.
Too excited about that.
Too excited. There's good internal balance in the book. External is another question. There's no units so far that are YGWY, although we will get to those. They're not. Most of those aren't in the book themselves.
There's one right here.
Sure. We'll get there. But Riptides, just 240 is just too much, in my opinion. Yeah. They're durable. They're non-interactive shooting.
A nice 20-point decrease would go a long way.
They used to shoot so hard, Siegs. Now they just don't.
They're still just a good defensive buffer. You can just jam up units with them. I've seen people talking about just running them up the table, hide them behind terrain in midfield, and then just go start tagging stuff, holding it down. The problem there is you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
This book doesn't need to do that.
And they can just hit every shot and completely kill something.
You actually can do crippling damage with this Tau book, so you don't need to piecemeal it turn over turn. Right. If your opponent stands out in the open, they're going to take crippling damage.
Yes.
And even if they don't, they're going to get whittled down such that you don't need to tie down their threats.
Yeah. You have plenty of rerolls and reliability in crisis suits and commanders and whatnot and getting close and good AP. You don't need a standoff piece that doesn't reroll. You just don't.
This is the bomber.
Sunshine.
Not the bomber, sorry. This is the bomber. This is the fighter jet.
Yeah.
It is trash. Why?
Don't sugarcoat it, Siegs.
There is no reason.
Give it to a straight doc.
There's no reason to run this. The Tau Flyers have no defense besides the -1 to hit. They have 4 up armor.
4 up armor, 12 wounds, toughness 7. Literally 0 defense on top of the -1.
And the amount of guns it has just does not line up with doing a lot of damage. And in addition, it doesn't have any other special rolls. It doesn't have extra pivots like the AdMech Flyers do.
It hits on 4s natively. So the same thing we were saying about the Riptide, which is imagine a Riptide. Because it hits on 4s with no rerolls. You need marker lights to make it hit on 3s. Again, no rerolls. Imagine a Riptide, but it was always visible to your opponent and less durable and a little cheaper. It's just the damage output is not reliable at all, and your opponent will just
It's an aircraft, so it's the one thing they can shoot in your army.
Everything else is great at denying your opponent's shots back. Crisis suit teams can fire indirect. They can fire in fade. Your commanders can be bodyguarded. Even your hammerheads or your... Sky Rays, if you want to do that, are taking narrow angles on the long side of the board, so your opponent can't really shoot them back. Ghost Keels, even though they're not the best damage output, can't be shot back. Same thing with Riptides. These things are the one thing that's just sitting there, just looking around like the one guy at a party who didn't get the memo, and he's just going to die.
What they should do with these flyers, and the ones that are just gunboats, is give them some rule that helps be like a spotter, that gives some sort of bonus if they're over the enemy army. Some interesting mechanic to help make them just less of, I'm just shooting guns, and either I'm too efficient at it and undercosted, or I don't do anything.
Yeah. I mean, GW managed to find a way to make Tau guns feel very multi-dimensional, but they just couldn't for flyers.
Which I'm fine with, honestly. Flyers are kind of boring.
I hate flyers,
I'd rather they be less about guns and more about like buffing your army by getting visibility and aerial surveillance and stuff. That would be much more interesting.
Yes.
Bomber is better because it has a much upgraded bomber profile, the amount of mortals that it can drop, and the consistency of dropping them. Problem is, it's still a flyer. It's not YGWY, but it's definitely overcosted, and it's going to be rarely seen because it has the same aircraft problem.
The biggest reason that the Sunshark is in YGWY, unless that's the other one, I really wouldn't be able to know.
This is the Sunshark bomber. That's the strike fighter.
I will not remember that.
Okay.
The real reason that the Sunshark is in YGWY is because it's compared to the bomber. The fighter is worse than the bomber.
Yep, the bomber has a purpose. It can do mortal wounds and help whittle things down, but it didn't get extra strats like the Admech flyers did. It doesn't have the extra defense or offensive efficiency, so they're still quite bad.
I will say, Sunshark is a cool name. So that is the one thing it's got going for it.
Okay, we've got last one in. I missed the this guy in heavy support.
Oh yeah,
Broadsides.
Broadsides.
They're core.
They are core.
So they benefit from the reroll ones. They benefit from Exemplar of the Exemplar of the Monk.
Exemplar of the Montclaw. They can advance and shoot with Montclaw. They have access to every buff except for the Crisis, except for the Commander's directed buffs. Those are only on Crisis.
Yep, Crisis core.
They are not jetpack, so they cannot fire and fade, but they are 8 wounds with a 2-up save base, and they are infantry now, so they gain the benefit of cover. They do get rerolls 1 to hit. If you are taking Shadow Sun, you can make them reroll all hits, which is not bad. They're good. I cannot say that they're not.
SMS is upgraded, Strength 5,
is
AP1
better.
inbuilt,
Yes.
and ignore cover.
And you combine to have swarms of indirect fire going towards your opponent. Which is quite nice at clearing them out. Like, it was before SMS was chip damage. Now SMS and air bursts are not chip damage anymore. You will get tabled out of line of sight. So they got a lot better, and their guns, their heavy rail rifles, got a lot scarier.
They are an amazing target for the Ethereal Invocation buffs of 5 of Funo Pain and -1 to hit.
For sure.
Because when they're hanging out there and they're the only target, you're loaded up with shield drones in there. The shield drones are part of the unit, so it's all -1 to hit. Only the broadsides get the 5 of Pheno Pain, but perfectly, that's if you make 5 of Pheno Pains. I didn't in the game yesterday, but if you do, they actually can tank a lot of damage.
They really can. They really can.
And in addition, the rail rifles themselves are amazing. It's Strength 9, AP 4, and flat 3 plus D3, and Immortal every time it wounds.
2 shots apiece, too,
2 shots
with
apiece.
Functionally infinite range.
It's super good. This unit is very strong. It's competing with Crisis Suits and Commanders as your main damage dealers, but it is going to be a tournament staple. It is very strong.
It is. The one thing I would warn about is it's the same thing as the Hammerhead, but it's clearly better than a Hammerhead.
Much better.
Much better than a Hammerhead.
Much cheaper. It's 90 points for the SMS rail package.
100%. Yeah. It is clearly better than a Hammerhead. Don't want to say otherwise. But in competitive games, again, people are going to only put units out there to be shot when they have gotten their value out of the unit and they don't care as much. That's not to say broadsides are bad. It's to say that the heavy rail rifle shooting is not the main reason it's good, because your opponents at higher level of events will not put their units out there to be shot unless they're okay with it for other reasons.
However, those big models, like a Crusher Stampede list with a lot of
3 broadsides.
Large things.
Do you have any broadsides in your list today against Nick's Crusher?
I do, but he is not running any D McCarrans.
What about Hyradules?
He is running, but you can actually hide them behind terrain because they're not quite as tall. The D McCarran is so tall.
I'll have to go adjust terrain, so there's no terrain that's tall enough.
It's just cargo containers.
Impartial. I'm impartial. I'm the referee here.
But yes, we are playing Tal versus Crusher Stampede in the War Room tonight. But
broadsides seem very good.
Because of its strength, it might push those type of units out of the meta just because you
so.
Don't want to get hit by the broadsides there.
Yes, broadsides will mess your entire day up.
It's the fact that they have the SMS for consistent guaranteed damage, and in Monka they can advance and still shoot. And because of the defensive buffs, it's okay that you put them in line of sight and just wait for your opponent to do stuff, or you tempt them by coming into the middle and be like, cool, when you finally commit, you're probably not going to do enough damage to the broadsides, and then I'm going to respond with everything.
Yes. So I think they're very good. I just want people to be a little warned about direct line of fire weapons that cannot fire and fade.
Yeah, I think you use them relatively aggressively, frankly.
I think so, for sure. It's like Eradicators, honestly. Eradicators don't sit back and try and wait for line of sight to pop up, because it never will against good opponents.
Yep.
They have to go and create lines of sight.
Yep, and that's why I think stabilized optics is really nice on them, because they probably will get tagged, and being able to efficiently shoot part of the guns into combat and the rest out.
Yeah. You could definitely, if you get tagged by a 5-man squad, you fire the heavy rail rifles into combat, do your mortal wounds, peel the unit out, hand them a bunch of saves, and then fire your SMS somewhere else. You allocate your SMS somewhere else, and then if the heavy rail rifles kill it, awesome. Then you're out of combat.
It's true with Monkai, you don't need the part of that bonus, but I think because you're going to use them aggressively to make sure you get angles and force your opponent to act while you do indirect damage to them, that it's worth having it to not have the penalty in combat.
Plus,
now, in Farsight Enclaves, it's not quite as relevant because you'll count as having a marker light on there.
Yeah.
So that's maybe where you do go for ATS. Or if you have Shadow Sun with Chapter Master, I like ATS on there. That's the 6's auto wound. The full rerolls really can make that.
They also look dope as hell, which
so
not inconsequential.
Next guy is the Storm Surge. He is dramatically improved. He went for
He better be.
2-up armor, T8, has a 4-up invuln inbuilt that you don't have to pay 40 points for, and his weapons were increased. So the Pulse Blast Cannon, the blast profile is a flat 12 damage now.
2 shots.
He's got the twin airburst that you can put on there. You can put the counter defense system on here to make sure that between that and a potential savior protocol by a nearby drone, you can make sure that you don't take some crippling damage to the unit. Still 22 wounds.
You're big about crippling damage,
or
huh?
up to 22 wounds. Yeah, I don't want crippling.
You don't want any of that. You want to be doing it.
It is one of the things that can be shot in your army, just because it's 22 wounds, so it doesn't benefit from obscuring, and it's quite large. But it does do a lot of damage. It's a little slower, moving 8 inches, but with Monkai, that can help out. And it just has a ton of guns. It's also not that easy to kill. So I like it a lot in Vorkon because the extra range helps at smaller guns and the Pulse Blast, the really scary profile. And in addition, you have access to the 2 CP strat to turn off invulns on the Pulse Blast Cannon. And then finally, it's -1 strength to strength 7 or less weapons. So all those strength 5 weapons are now wounding you on 6s. Strength 7, it doesn't affect that. If it affected strength 8, it would be ridiculously amazing.
Yes.
But they've been a little more careful with that, I guess. But
it also takes their Plasma Blast Cannon and just says you ignore invulns.
Yep.
And that thing you're looking at that was giving you a mean look is dead.
And
Gone.
it's around 330 points, which is very reasonable for a super heavy that can put out this much damage and has very good defensive mechanics. So where are you thinking, Jack?
I mean, it is significantly memey. I think you can put it in situational, but how many points is it?
330.
Situational, but good. I think that's where I put it.
You think?
I don't think I put it in strong in most lists, and I don't think 330 it's overcosted. I think I would put it in situational, but good. I was thinking it was going to be more like 450 or something.
Yeah, in the super heavy Augs, I would be thinking, I think this is a threat overload type of list where you're looking at running 3 of them in the super heavy detachment.
The other thing is you can take it instead of broadsides and have it be your like direct line of sight murder thing. I don't think it's as good as broadsides, so that's why I'm having situational but good, but it can slot in that fashion.
But I think in the Borkon list, supported that it's up here. In Borkon, I think you will actually see it more often than not. Outside of Borkon, I think it's situational but good.
Yeah.
It is a good super heavy. It does a lot of damage. It's a good defensive profile.
It also absolutely murks knights.
But
it's its job.
But in Borkon, it does go up a tier where you're going to see it quite often, and it's strong in Borkon. Is it the strongest way to play it? I'm not sure there. But I have 2 that are sitting over there from Warpfire, and I'm going to put them together, and we're going to get them on the table.
You were going to meme the hell out of Nick.
And Nick
Can we make him play Crusher Stampede into that? Please?
It'll play something else.
Knights.
Knights.
Chaos Knights. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on, the Devilfish. We've talked about it in combination with some of the other units here. It's a good transport. It's fast moving. It gained a wound, so it's up to 13 wounds. And still T7. In addition, it has very good upgraded support. So it got a better burst cannon, upgraded SMS like the other units. And on top of that, it is, depending on which tactical philosophy you choose, it gets a bonus. So Monka, it's a pregame move of 9 inches. That's awesome.
That is super good.
The forward pressure going first that it can put on is very, very, very powerful. And then Kalyun you can put into strategic reserve. Not quite as useful, frankly, but it could help if you're running multiple Devilfish. And in that case, where you are choosing Kalyun, Devilfish are kind of hard to hide because of how tanky and large they are.
Yes.
So-
They are kind of flat and low to the ground, which helps, but
Just
they
a
are
width.
very wide.
Yeah.
They are thick.
In addition, you have the strat to be able to disembark breachers after you move, or disembark your infantry after you move. So you can get them out, do a lot of shooting damage with both units. Like we talked about, I think this combo is strong, and you are going to see it. I just don't think you're going to see it in the absolute top lists.
And the main reason I want to put it in strong in most lists is it keeps up our even numbers of tournament staples, strong in most lists, situational but good, and overcost is rarely seen, obviously. Although these next upcoming units are probably going to fill out our YGWY.
So that is going to go ahead and leave us with Forge World. So we'll go in the same order. So Shas'O Raleigh, he suffers from he's very cheap for a commander, but he suffers from the fact that he has none of the datasheet upgrades that these commanders do. And he doesn't have anything special like Shadow Sun. So he's not overcosted, but he really needs a datasheet upgrade to do something that these commanders do for at least crisis suits. He should really get it for hazard suits because that's what he's in, a hazard suit.
Yeah, if hazard suits and him got a facelift, that'd be awesome.
He needs
hazard
an updated datasheet that gives a cool buff, maybe even just the crisis buff or something similar to hazard suits.
I mean, the models are so cool. Like, I just want to run hazard suits, but currently not exactly the most optimal.
Then the hazard suits themselves, they did not get weapon updates in the FAQ update. Unfortunately,
they're also not core.
They're not core, so I really wish they would just go back and do new datasheets for these units based on the new Tau Codex, because it seems like Tau was written after they did the Forge World update, which makes sense because it's only just coming out now. They're okay. They're -2 to charge in their battle suits, so they can spend 1 CP to give the opponent -4 to charge, which is a cool tech choice. They're not horrendously expensive, and in the FAQ update, they said to look for the points in the Tau Codex. The Tau Codex has points on particular data sheets, and the hazards don't have a data sheet there, so people are arguing that they're just all free. Which rules is written, yes, but I don't think any of the big tournaments are going to rule that way.
No tournament is going to let you take 9 hazard suits for free.
Not the hazard suit, the drones.
Oh, the drones
the drones and the upgrades.
Same deal. They're not going to let you take that for free.
That's probably not going to happen, and eventually Games Workshop will figure that out and actually do it. So I'm not going to play it that way. I don't believe any big tournaments will rule it that way.
No.
So they also need a datasheet update. They are not horrendous. You could put them in, especially the burst cannon version up here, but the problem they're in YGWY because they need a datasheet update. They should gain core, just like the crisis suits up here, and Raleigh should benefit hazard suits.
The thing is, we know that they knew about core when the book came out. Right, when the Imperial Armor Forge World supplement thing came out, because there are units in there with core.
But they didn't know what their plan was for Tau, what battle suits would gain it or whatnot.
That's true. I would not assume that they're going to gain core,
even if they don't get core.
I would say it's better, more likely than not.
They need the weapon updates. They need to have weapons.
They need to have better weapons.
Yep, because the weapons that go on commanders and crisis suits dramatically were upgraded. They need a similar facelift.
They really do.
And if they do get it, they will be up here. But for now, I think they should be down here because they need serious update to their
Not
rules.
being core holds them back. If they get core and weapon facelifts, we could really see them spiking up to orange or red. But as of now, they are in YGWY. They're just straight up outshone.
The Tetra, it is actually situational but good. It's the case where you need marker lights, you need things that are fast and get you engaged very easily, and get behind terrain angles to be able to put marker lights for your indirect fire. They do this very well, moving 18 inches, and they're very small profile, so it's easy to hide them. I like them a lot in BoardCon because they benefit from the Sept a lot. But
yeah, from the minus strength. What toughness are they?
They're T5.
Okay, so they do really benefit. Strength.
They do, yep.
Strength 5, so 3...
6, 5, and 4.
5 and 6. Yeah, 3, 5, and 6 are the ones that change their breakpoints against them.
So I like them quite a bit there. They're not amazing. They're not like amazingly much better than Pathfinders or marker drones, but I like the fact that their vehicles there, and turn 1 they can be your engaged thing. If you don't want to go for the Crude Hounds because you want to get marker lights for your indirect fire. They synergize pretty good with indirect fire.
They do, for sure.
Remora drones, they are not vehicles or monsters. They used to be the single best thing to do engage in the early game. and they're very annoying to deal with. They're just drones, so they no longer benefit from engage, which is a huge nerf to them.
Yes.
And at this point, they need some sort of datasheet update, because in addition to that, they're aircraft, and they're supposed to come in units of like 4 to 6, or 1 to 6, or 1 to 5.
But you can only take 2 aircraft models in your army.
You can only take 2 aircraft models, so it
Yes.
no longer, the datasheet doesn't make any sense anymore. So they need some sort of update.
Yes.
Which is true for, guess what, almost all of this. So the Arvarna, the Yavara, they are absolute garbage. Their weapons are terrible. They have no purpose. They're dramatically overcosted. They need a serious relook. For why they nerfed the Yavara so much is insane, because it already wasn't very good.
Yes.
It was just something that could do spike damage if you rolled well.
Now they're damage 1, not damage 3.
Now they're just terrible. Now they don't do any damage. So they need serious help. Same thing for all these flyers.
Tiger
they went
Shark.
from BS2 to BS4, and they're still incredibly expensive.
And they're low quantity of shots on their heavy weapons.
The Tiger Shark actually puts out quite a bit of shots. But
well,
that's
unlike
not
their heavy rail cannons or whatever, they're hitting on like 4s. Like 4 shots.
The AX01 or whatever.
Yeah. And they also, I expect they'll ignore invulns on their heavy rail whatevers.
They need datasheet updates, and they are a giant flyer that can be shot, and all the anti-tank that's in the game right now is just going to do crippling damage to these flyers.
Crippling damage.
Crippling. They're just dead.
They're just dead. They're crippled.
Seriously, imagine just Longstrike shows up, and he's like, I'm going to have a field day here with these Broadside
salvo
friends.
launchers are going to kill them. Dark Lances are going to kill them. Bright Lances, I imagine, are going to kill them.
I believe there's still only 16 wounds. With a
they're going to die immediately, and they don't do a lot of damage. They certainly don't do crippling damage.
Not crippling.
Not crippling. Not even close. And then they die. It's unfortunate, but they need a rework.
The Taunar also finds himself in YGWY. He is just completely outclassed by 3 Storm Surges.
I think he belongs in the Taunar tier, which is at the top.
Yeah, and when he's in control of all the things that Nick wants to do, he's up here.
Yep.
But if we were being serious about how his plays on the tabletop, it is down here, because
true.
There's no reason you wouldn't. If you were thinking about a Taunar, you're going to run 3 Storm Surges before you run a Taunar. 100%.
Yeah. The Taunar lives in the YGWY category and also rent-free in Nick's head.
The Manta is, somebody mentioned it before. I got confirmation GW is going to allow Forge World if you win one of the big events and you get an army from them. They're allowing Forge World. I have asked just for the Manta because it's
you
2,000
get a 2,000 point list. So Siegs is like, can I include Forge World in that? And they're like,
yeah.
Yes. And Siegs is like, all right, Manta.
So we're going to see if they approve that or not. If they do, I'm 100% getting it. If they don't, we'll figure something else out. But it actually puts out a lot of shots and can hold a ton of infantry, so it's good.
200.
This is good in Apocalypse. Outside of that, no. It's a 2,000 point unit that can't do any of the mission stuff.
Yep. But in APOC...
But in Apocalypse, it's good.
If we get it in time for the APOC game that we're going to do sometime in the summer, you might see it terrorizing Nick on the other side of the board.
60 wounds, 1 million models inside. Imagine this thing popping out 3 hammerheads. 8 crisis suits, and then
200
breachers and drones. It's awesome. And that is the tier list. So overall, this is actually one of the healthier books here.
Yeah. Internal, so almost everything in YGWY is from Forge World, which whatever.
It was written a while ago.
Let's look at the actual book.
Yep.
The actual book, there's almost nothing that's in YGWY, and the only thing that is the flyer, which whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Like,
even
I'm not
if it was
interested
good,
in flyers being good.
Even if it was much better, you're still probably not running it. It would just be stuck down here.
Yes, but everything else in the book is very internally balanced. We'll see about external balance as the book develops. It does seem very strong. I know there was a question earlier.
Yeah, so we can go
get back to that. But internal balance on the book, there's almost no unit that's just straight up like garbage. And as I said, the one that is the flyer, and heck with them. I don't really care.
The thing about the 8th edition Tau book was had horrible internal balance. There were 3 units that were good. It was commanders, riptides, shield drones, and then everything else was pretty much unplayable garbage.
Unplayable. Now
there were like, you could run 5-man strike teams or breachers, but that was to get a battalion. That was because you needed a battalion, not because those were good units. Now all of the units up here you can run in a list, and they're actually quite useful. These ones you can still run them. You're trading efficiency
for whatever it is you want from that unit, whether you want a 25-point character or you want a little untargetable unit hang out in the back, you want a cheap unit to deep strike in, you want a unit that's tough to kill and fire and fades in the Riptide. Like, they do a thing.
But you don't just lose games because you put these units in here.
Exactly. They're not optimal, but you know, it's fine.
So this is actually one of the better internal balance books that comes out. Now, to the question, the super chat from earlier, what do we think?
Do we think they're too good?
Yep.
And if they are, how would we tune them back? Answering part one, do we think they're overtuned? I think they have the potential to be overtuned for sure. It is hard to say. The book has come out recently, is posted up some results. Most books do post up some results immediately after coming out. They have looked very strong, but I think we need a little bit more time to determine whether they are overtuned. They are not super interactive, which is kind of a problem.
Yep.
A lot of their shooting ignores line of sight, and then a lot of they have ways to... They have bodyguard out the wazoo, and they have a lot of fire and fade shenanigans, and they have a lot of indirect fire, which leads to not particularly interactive games. That is something GW may want to take a look at in the future. Their direct fire weapons are quite good as well, which means they can take a nerf to their indirect fire and still probably come out the other side looking all right. It is hard to say whether they're overtuned right now, though.
Yep.
If they are overtuned, let's just assume that they are.
Sure.
How would we tune them back?
I think it starts with the indirect fire.
I think it certainly does.
So for broadsides, I've seen people saying take away core. I just hate that solution. So instead, I would just increase.
That would nuke them into the ground.
They're not a 90-point unit. Come on, they're at least 105 for that unit.
Yeah, they would go from tournament staple to overcross rarely seen in a
I'd give them a 15-point base increase. Maybe not even base. Maybe put points on the actual rail rifle, because the missile ones are more expensive, and they're not because they don't do missiles aren't that great anymore. So maybe you just increase the price on the rail rifle instead of making it free. Add 15 points to it, and that would probably be pretty reasonable. As a first change.
What you want to do is you want to limit the ability of someone to take 9 broadsides, stack SMS, and just shred you with SMS. That's the thing you want to prevent from happening. Raising them 15 points per model would do that. One unit, still totally fine. Heavy rail rifles, whatever. You'd still take one unit, but you don't want to just stack 9 of them firing, 72 SMS shots a turn. Now we need to turn to the indirect on the crisis unit.
It should never have gone to 24-inch range.
Yeah, should stay
it just go back to 18. Force the unit to actually be quite close to your army in order to get most of its damage out. Yes. I think that's just reduce it back to 18-inch range on the airburst.
I think 18 would be good. I think Montcalm might need a rider of if you're in range and in half range of your weapon. So that way 18-inch range guns don't just get all the benefits inherently of Montcalm.
They could try that change first. I don't think they're going to try and change an army-wide rule before changing a particular data sheet.
Probably not.
They seem not to like to do that.
You could also strip them back to 18 inches and take the AP off.
I don't think that
would. I don't think that would neuter them.
I think you do one. You start with one.
I think you start with one. It definitely, the indirect is what would need to get hit first if they end up being too good.
In addition, the bodyguard, they need two different things should happen game wide. They should look at bodyguard and change how it works. So first of all, it should just be infantry units.
Yes.
And then there should be a rider where if the character's the closest visible target, it still gets shot anyway.
Yes.
You shouldn't be hanging bodyguards back out of line of sight in a terrain piece and the character out in the open. That makes no sense. Change that. Yeah. Then the second thing is they should just change every indirect piece in the game, because this is just going to be a recurring problem. All of a sudden,
every
there's too many buffs on an indirect thing. So let's change indirect fire. They should introduce a spotter keyword for indirect weapons, and in order for this weapon to benefit from rerolls and for it not to have an unmodifiable -1 to hit to your ballistic skill when firing this indirect weapon, you need to have a spotter unit that has line of sight to that unit you're targeting.
Yeah.
That means you're trading a unit guaranteed each time you want the indirect fire, and then you have to do that turn after turn after turn.
Yes.
Or you're putting the unit itself into line of sight, which reduces the efficiency of indirect. So I would do those two changes. I think those game-wide changes would help tone this codex down more than changing particular data sheets outside of broadsides, which are just too efficient for their points.
I think crisis suits are also a little too. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think 24 needs to go back to 18 on the air bursts. Indirect has just been a problem for as long as it's been a thing. You're basically relying on the efficiency of the unit not being there in order for it to not be broken.
Yeah.
And as soon as the efficiency of an indirect piece is good enough, it does brutal things to the metagame. It's just non-interactive shooting, which is a problem. And too many armies get access to it, which means a couple indirect pieces are going to always be good. Because too many armies get them. So you need to do something about indirect. I love the spotter idea. You could then give Tau good spotters.
Yeah, it makes it the planes can be spotters, the marksmen can be spotter, the piranhas can do that job, tetras, Pathfinders, they all can do that job. And it would make it very interactive because I'm setting up plays, you can move block me so I can't get my spotters in range. It would be a whole thing.
Yes.
And it would make the game more interactive rather than just increasing points or just putting these. Because indirect,
it's a bandit.
SMS is actually key to how Tau plays in the fluff. Right. So I would like a more nuanced approach where it's a game-wide change to how those things function, but who knows what they're going to do.
And it's not that every indirect piece is broken. Clearly not.
The Thunderfire cannon exists now.
It does, I guess.
Admech has the Scorpius tank. It's perfectly fine.
What I'm saying is every army has access to indirect, which means by just the law of large numbers,
not GSC.
Okay.
Guard detachment, I guess.
By the law of large numbers, if there's enough indirect pieces in the game, some of them are going to be good. Which means at any point in time, there's going to be good indirect in the game.
Yeah.
And good
they've
indirect
had a problem. It's just problematic.
Always bad for 40k. Always. It's going as far back as I've been playing this game for like 8 years. Competitively. And its indirect fire has always been a non-interactive problem in the game. Always. From the start, because it just doesn't have counterplay. Counterplay is the key to a good game, and if there's no counterplay,
which is why I think the spotter is so interesting because it can create a lot of counterplay there with movement and trading different things.
And as you were saying, Tau need indirect, because you can't run in and take an objective away in hand to hand, so you need some form of indirect for the game to work. So you give Tau the best spotters.
Yeah,
I think that'd be awesome,
and that's how they play in the fluff.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
They use speed and mobility to find the weak points, which is what a spotter's doing, and then you hit them with the damage.
I think the other problem is that GW makes the units that have indirect fire good as though they didn't have indirect fire. Indirect fire units are generally statted as though the same as direct fire units, but they don't realize, I think, how big of a difference adding that indirect onto the unit is. Hive Guard are fine until they have indirect fire. Once they have indirect fire, they go past fire.
Because it's ignore light cover, it's AP2, it's multi-damage, there's so many buffs you can stack on the unit. It's when you start stacking buffs. If the Tau indirect wasn't damage 1, it would be extremely oppressive. Now I think small tone downs to it will make it perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think
I'm not tabling, as Jack saw, I wasn't tabling Grey Knights with indirect fire. I was killing a couple.
Literally tabled Grey Knights with indirect fire.
It was direct fire because I actually went up and murdered him with all my guns.
Direct fire killed the big stuff, but everything else died indirect.
When I went and got line of sight because I wanted the extra AP, I was actually getting next to him anyway. Sure. So if we did the changes, it wouldn't have made a difference there.
Tau indirect does get worse when you don't have the range and you don't have the AP and you don't have marker lights and all of that.
Those first couple turns, you saw it. I killed like 2 different.
The easiest fix is we just count anything with a marker light on it as spotted.
Yeah, you can also do that. Yeah. So I would love some changes like that, but they typically don't get that adventurous because it's more of a design thing. But fingers crossed. Anyway, yeah, that's the Tau. We're super positive on Tau. Love this codex. It's very well internally balanced. There's a couple of units that could get some points decreases. A couple of them they're just fun choices, but they're not overcosted where you actively hurt yourself if you run them. But the vast majority of units in this book are actually good. You can run them in a competitive list, and you're going to do great with it. So,
yeah,
awesome news for the Tau players. This is a dramatic reversal from the 8th edition book, which was quite honestly one of the worst codexes that has been put out there.
Yeah,
definitely an 8th edition. So, Super positive about this. We're going to play many more games. Tonight, we've got me playing Farsight Enclave's Allied World into Nick's Crusher Stampede.
Looking forward to that really hard.
2 top table armies, and we're going to see how they go.
Honestly, Farsight Enclave is a very exciting way to play the game. You get right up close to your opponent, which is always fun. I'm really happy they did that with Tau. They made Tau function much better close to your opponent.
Yep.
So they take away that gun line approach. You now have to be more mobile, be closer. A lot more interesting games. So really looking forward to that.
Yep. So thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to send you off for a commercial of the War Room, telling you about all the great content that's in there. Like we said, that coaching match is in there. The War Room is available on YouTube. If you want to check out the playlist, there's an entire War Room section which shows all the different content that we put out each week. Lots of coaching games, lots of clinics, and tons of fun conversation going on there, as well as access to our wonderful Discord channels.
All right.
So
this has it's been a lot of fun, Siegs. Put it here.
Until next time, Jack. We'll see you. Tell us what you thought of the video in the comments below. Give us a like. Tell your friends about it. We're going to keep doing these tier list videos. So if there's anything you want us to improve upon, just let us know. But, we're trying to have them as like, this is, if I want to learn about this faction and why units are good and their synergies, we're trying to make these tier lists like that rather than simply here's what's good in a superficial way.
This was a lot of fun to do.
Yep. And it's also our longest one. And hopefully... this is 3 hours of really good information for you guys. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
There's so many rules in 40K, hundreds of events, and constant updates. Skip the learning curve of Warhammer and join the pros. Art of War is led by multiple world champions with decades of success. We teach clinics, stream games, and inspire you to succeed at your favorite hobby. Join our global community of gamers